Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Select Board for Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. Let's slide right into announcements and updates. I believe that Mel has an update.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I wanted to update you on the Newbury College planning process, which we've talked about recently. And just to remind you, as part of the process, as part of the sale and redevelopment of Newbury College to Welltower, the town acquired 3+ acres of land on the west side of Fisher Avenue for general municipal purposes. And that property includes a functioning academic and office building and a converted residential building that's in poor condition. The property has been acquired and is under the legal jurisdiction of the Select Board. There is no legal mandate or restrictions on its use that was imposed by town meeting, although implementation of most of all uses will require future town meeting action and funding. The board has committed to engage in a comprehensive and inclusive process to determine the long-term use or uses of the property. The process would likely involve an advisory committee, a consultant to refine costs and feasibility of uses, and public engagement activities. Preliminary engagement during the earlier process to acquire the property identified a range of possible uses. They included affordable housing, athletic fields, municipal offices or workshops, school offices or classrooms, a recreational facility, a satellite public meeting or program space, among others. Some of these possible uses were studied in a conceptual way, for example, a school classroom use. At this time, the ability of the planning department to support a robust public process, including the advisory committee, a team of consultants, and a public engagement process, is very limited and would require other important economic development projects to be reprioritized. We should talk about this, and I will like to schedule this matter for a future discussion of the board. Perhaps there are ways to support a future public process at this time, including a staff survey or a public opinion survey or some preliminary staff work with a consultant. But at this time, I think we should have a discussion, because I know that whenever there is work that's done at the staff level prior to a public process, there could be some concerns about transparency or objectivity. So definitely put it on the calendar in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much, Mel. I also want to just note that item number 12 on our agenda has been postponed to next week. Any other announcements or updates, John?
Thanks very much, and thanks, Mel, for that announcement. So I have a couple of announcements. The first one, returning to a favorite subject of mine from recent weeks, which is Team Brookline and the Boston Marathon. And Team Brookline ran a very, very, very good race. And I got some details from Nancy Weinberg at the Brookline Community Mental Health Center, who is one of the major people who sort of pulls together the whole Team Brookline effort. Team Brookline being runners who do individual fundraising for Brookline nonprofits, charities. So all 33 Team Brookline runners finished the race. And team members came through mile 23, which is Washington Square, between 1:15 p.m. and 5:20 p.m. The team raised over $300,000, which will support 5 charity partners. That's almost better than ARPA, I think, but $300,000 for 5 charity partners. And the top individual fundraiser on the team to date has raised $17,068. So what can I say except woo-hoo for Team Brookline? I didn't want to shout it like I did on the day of the marathon as I was walking up and down Beacon Street. But that deserves a big cheer from all of us in Brookline. The second thing came to my attention just within the past several days, and this is good news of a sort of fiscal financial nature. And it all started when I was checking some news sources from other communities and saw the mayor of Springfield, Massachusetts, with a great big grin on his face and a check in his hand to go with a story about how a literally over a decade-long legal dispute between the city of Springfield and Eversource, the utility, had finally resulted in Eversource acknowledging that they were not going to be able to continue their insistence that they did not owe the full amount of their tax bill to the city of Springfield. They had been withholding 50% of it at a very high interest rate for many, many years. And it's a story that I had become acquainted with some months ago, and which led to my discovery that Brookline is also a community that was treated to a withholding of property taxes by Eversource. Whoop. Got that problem solved. No, we don't. Okay, now it's solved. Nope, now it's not solved. Okay.
Try it again.
Hello, hello. Hello? Much better. Okay.
Hey, first time with the computer.
It's okay. That's okay. I've been there. All right. To continue the story, Eversource owed Brookline money just as they owed Springfield and a whole bunch of other communities money, stemming from a dispute over taxes. I mean, to give them, their due. They were trying to say they didn't really owe the money. And they were appealing it in court, and it dragged on, and the interest rates kept piling up. So anyway, they have apparently decided they are not going to prevail ultimately in this court challenge, and they have decided to start paying up what they owe to the various communities from whom they've been withholding property taxes. And I inquired of Mel this morning and found out that I had missed a letter, but it was apparently put out by our Director of Finance, Justin Casanova, on Friday, announcing that on April 14th, Brookline received a check for $6,940,211.55. Not a bad sum, representing all of the owed personal property taxes, including interest, through the third quarter of FY22. This is all coming from Eversource. To put this into context and to sort of dampen people's excitement about this just a tiny bit, it isn't completely over yet. As it was explained in the story coming out of Springfield, they haven't officially ended the appeals, but they've apparently sort of concluded that they might as well pay up because they're not going to get what they want out of the appeals. So the appeals are not officially ended. That's my understanding. And furthermore, just to sort of give you some insight as to how money can flow into the town, but not necessarily immediately mean that we're that much richer. We've been holding aside that amount of money. Mel will correct me if I'm explaining this wrong, for years in case we didn't win. And now the account in which we sort of were holding that money aside can actually be replenished with the actual money. And that will free up ultimately down the chain of, fiscal connections to other accounts. It'll free up money that we hadn't had before for other purposes, and will maybe, lighten the burden a little bit on people who pay our taxes, unlike Eversource, which spent over a decade disputing its taxes. So I thought that was pretty good news, and I thought I should share it.
Thank you. Raul, did you have an announcement? And then Bernard, let me know if you have an announcement. Okay.
Thanks, Heather. I'll just two brief announcements. One, very excited to get the word today that Meredith Mooney, who's been a planner in our economic development division, is being elevated to the director of that division. She has been, whether it's supporting the work of the Small Business Development Committee, which I've chaired during my time on the board, or the Economic Development Advisory Board, partnering and working directly with small business owners and also property owners as well. Helping to navigate this mess that was created by the pandemic for the business community through our virtual town halls. She has been an exemplary civil servant, and she is, I know, going to be a fantastic director of economic development for our planning division. So just wanted to kudos on the appointment for Kara Bruton, who heads the division, and for Mel, who manages all of our staff. Could not be happier about that. The other thing I wanted to mention is the board recently received a letter from none other than Steve Poftak, the general manager of the MBTA. As many that have been following our work know, we submitted some time ago a letter in support of the work that we've already been doing to explore a fare free 66 bus pilot in tandem with our neighbors in Cambridge and Boston. This is, I think, a really important indication that the T is willing to be meaningful partners in that work. In the letter, Steve Poftak says, as we all work together toward providing a more efficient, equitable public transit service for residents and visitors of the Commonwealth, we welcome continuing the discussion from our conversation this past December on the topic of fare-free bus routes, with an indication that he'll work with Mel Kleckner to set up a meeting to move that work forward. Kudos to our chair, Heather Hamilton, who's been on top of this, Brian Kane, the head of our transportation board, who's been on top of this, Todd Crane, our transportation administrator, as well as Aaron Galentine, who heads up our DPW office. This has been something that we've been working on for a while, and I'm really excited to hear from the T that they are willing partners in this as we explore what it might look like to have a fare-free 66 route in Brookline, and I cannot wait to be there the first day that we actually make it happen to ride that bus. So just wanted to share that with everyone.
Great. Any other announcements? Okay, let's go into public comment. Raul?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. We do have a few rules I'd like to share. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Please refrain from personal attacks and from addressing personnel issues during your comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining, and when your time is up, please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Devin, who's first on our list?
The first person signed up for public comment is Danelle. Danelle, you can join us at the presentation station. Make sure that mic is unmuted and your 3 minutes will begin.
It's gonna start again. Thank you. So, I saw 3C, and I'm just gonna repeat myself for those who didn't hear me. That the importance of the Juneteenth celebration and having the funding for the food trucks and the games for the kids and the unity it provided for the town, we weren't able to do as much as I felt, and others felt the town deserved. So this funding is crucial to see the what and the who really appreciate the event. I also had a comment on the Davis Path. So we expanded our precinct, right? Precinct 4 is now a majority minority precinct, and the safest route to New Lincoln, the old Lincoln School, is White Place, and would be over that path. And so I would really like to see, and others, pretty sure in my precinct would like to see something happen with that, the Davis path and footbridge there. It's the safest route. It's just, I know precinct 5 has been talking about, the previous precinct 5 members have been talking about it a lot and for a very long time. So, those are my comments. I really appreciate every one of you. And thank you. I'm gonna be sitting watching.
The next person who signed up for public comment is Bonnie Bastian. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable. Your 3 minutes will begin.
Hey everybody, please excuse the intense lighting. My name is Bonnie Bastian, town meeting member in Precinct 5. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. This is such an important moment. I want to express my gratitude for everyone that has labored over the decisions on the table tonight with the ARPA money. I'm sure you have had an onslaught of input from folks like myself. The review committee did not have an easy job. Thank you for putting in so much thought and consideration. I'm thrilled to see this proposed slate of projects with applications from BHA, Steps to Success, Women Thriving, the Food Pantry, Council on Aging, and the Brookline Improvement Coalition, and so many more lined up to receive at least a portion of their funding. Those projects will be set up to address the critical needs conveyed in your stated priorities, like mental health care, programs to sustain folks living with food insecurity, affordable housing, and more. When we look at the proposed amounts for each item in the slate, it struck me that the third highest funding level for this ARPA money is currently set to be spent on just the design of the new Davis Footpath Bridge at $1.4 million. I know that this project is important. I understand that the old Lincoln School will be used in the future and that this could be used by many students being displaced by other school renovations. But there are options available to them. Walnut Street can be used to avoid Boylston Street as a way to get to Washington or Cypress. Whether the footpath is built or not, students still need to cross Boylston, which feels like the most dangerous aspect. And from the other side of Boylston, where I live, access to what has been described as the civic center of Brookline is easily accessed by residents using Cypress and Washington. I do it all the time. But I want to be clear. I am excited for the footpath to be rebuilt, and making it ADA compliant is exactly right. But I don't understand the willingness to spend the third highest amount allocated in this round of ARPA funds, only surpassed in price tag by the public school operating budget funds and BHA renovation funds, to only accomplish its design. This is more money than what is allocated to both Steps to Success applications in total.
You have 30 seconds.
It's more than the food pantry's allocation, more than the teen center's allocation to expand their critical support for our most vulnerable youth. It's more than Brookline Interactive slated to get for their recovery and expansion. It's more than Brookline Improvement Coalition's operating budget allotment for their affordable housing work. Budgets reflect our priorities, and this one feels off the mark of the stated priorities the Select Board has put forth after the BCF's community engagement process. I'm joining the voices of other residents to advocate for the most vulnerable populations in town, to make a plea for you to please reallocate at least $1 million of this 1.4 million to the BHA renovations. Your public housing constituents have bravely shown up and have had their difficult stories and emotions put on public display.
You've reached 3 minutes.
Hear directly from them about just how bad their living situation is. Please, please consider this change to the slate. Thank you so much.
The next person signed up for public comment is Naomi Schweitzer. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video. Your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Select Board members. My name is Naomi Schweitzer, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I echo the prior speaker's gratitude to the review committee for all the work that you have put into reviewing the many applications for American Rescue Plan funding and the incredible opportunity that this is for the town at this time. And also a big thank you to the town staff, Melissa and Tyler and others for shepherding this process. Huge lift of work going on. I'd like to encourage the Select Board tonight, when you're considering the American Rescue Plan slate of projects, to move more funding to the Brookline Housing Authority. While they are on the slate to receive some funding, they need more. The Housing Authority requested at their top amount, $16 million, and that does not even begin to adequately address the deferred maintenance and the poor conditions that our public housing units are currently in. And given the ARPA expenditure deadlines, they really need this funding in this first round to be able to use as much time as possible to line up the labor and the materials needed, which are not easy, either of those, during this time of high inflation and difficulty locating labor and the skilled labor needed to complete these repairs. We have heard from our public housing residents in the American Rescue Plan public engagement process that was run by the Brookline Community Foundation, and we have heard from them in the housing production plan process run by the consultants that were hired by the planning department. They have shown up to meetings and they have talked about the conditions that are poor, that they live in, and that most of us would never feel comfortable having our own family members live in. It is critical that we show our values, that we want to preserve our existing, most deeply affordable housing in town, that is our public housing units. I implore you to take some of the funding that is available in this first round of $20 million and move some of it from some of the costs that are not as directly related to people's health and safety over to the Brookline Housing Authority allocation. Thank you so much.
The next person signed up for public comment is Jonathan Klein, but I don't see him in the attendee list. At this time, there are 40 attendees virtually and 3 in person. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature. One moment. Ryan Black, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video and your time will begin.
Hi, I'm audible then. I'm going to assume I'm audible. Okay.
Ryan,
yep. So
go ahead.
Thank you. So I want to echo the points made by town meeting members Bonnie Bastian and Naomi Schweitzer. We talk a lot rightfully about the importance of community engagement, particularly from the residents we hear from the least and who are the most in need. But the second half of that is what needs to occur after that engagement happens is, and we hear people share some hard truths that they aren't used to sharing, it that might make them feel vulnerable to share, is we need to make sure we act upon what they're talking about. And in this case, it's very much increasing the amount of ARPA funds that we're putting towards BHA repairs. Because again, that's the other half of community engagement. If people share vulnerable things, we need to show that we're serious and that we will actually act upon those needs. I'll wrap up there. Thank you.
That concludes public comment at this time.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, one more.
Natalia, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for jumping in at the last minute. My name is Natalia Linos. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 6, and I am the new chair of the Advisory Council on Public Health. And I wanted to echo a lot of what has been said by Naomi, by Bonnie, by Ryan, thanking first the committee for the work you're doing, but really asking you to focus on both the most vulnerable and the health needs. I had done a calculation prior looking at what percentage of the funds was going directly to public health, to mental health. And I feel that to some extent it's inadequate with the current trends in terms of, increasing rates, both in our schools as well as in our community. I would also call on the select board to set aside a small amount, whether it's 200,000 or 500,000 for emergency use by the health department. We will need it, and we will need it at the minute that the health department needs it. I don't think right now it is wise for us. I know that they are going to be putting forward in the second round a more comprehensive application, but I do urge you tonight to set aside some money for additional testing, additional possible vaccinations for boosters. And I want to echo those who urged you to reconsider how we think about housing. Housing is fundamental to public health, and it has been threatened. So I would also support the calls for more resources to go to BHA. But as an epidemiologist and as the chair of the Advisory Council of Public Health, I really urge you to allow the health department to have some flexible response funds. Maybe Mel has already planned for that as a separate bucket, but we will not have time to rediscuss. It should be available to them. And something that I have raised, there is burnout, real burnout for many parts of our town, but I do think the health department, if they need short-term support when there's a new surge, they should be able to get that support. And I urge you to do that to protect all of us. Thank you so much.
Next person signed up for public comment is Bob Lepson. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Lepson, town meeting member from Precinct 9, also a member of the CDICR. I don't want to spend a lot of time. I would like to echo and amplify the comments of Bonnie Bastian and Naomi Schweitzer. They spoke beautifully, and so I don't need to repeat. I did want to just make a comment about the cost of the Davis Avenue footbridge. I had an opportunity to speak with a friend who is an engineer, and we were trying to figure out where the $1.4 million for planning comes from. I went searching on the town website, couldn't find any of the specific proposals. I just don't understand. He sort of said, okay, so if we're talking about, high-end architect firm, a high-end engineer, and dealing with the MBTA, he says, maybe 300,000, maybe 400,000. To me, that felt like a lot. But $1.4 million, that number is way, way beyond the pale. And so, like what Bonnie and Naomi and Ryan indicated before, there is at least an extra $1 million that needs to be reallocated from that project, if that project is going to use any of the ARPA money, and move over to the Brookline Housing Authority for additional renovations. And also, I really, really want to emphasize the importance of completely eliminating any of the utility debt. I know that on the slate that has been fully funded, and please do not take 1 penny away from that as well. Thank you very much.
The next person signed up for public comment is Liz Neal. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Folks, just to echo what everyone else has said and thanking the committee so much. I know it's a lot. There are a lot of proposals that came out of this. And even just looking at these numbers can make your head spin. One thing jumped out to me, and I just wanted to make sure that I'm calling that out to y'all tonight. I noticed that you had your own targets for the different allocations for vulnerable populations, for government operations and capital. And right now, we're actually under allocating for vulnerable populations according to that target. Initially, it was meant to be 12 million, and we are at 10.993. So just to echo what everyone has said so far, but specifically in terms of meeting that target, let's bring that back up for the vulnerable populations We know there's need in Brookline. We have plenty of deserving folks who can use that money and could really put it to good use. So I just urge you to really make that million, put that in the vulnerable populations bucket where it really needs to go. Thank you so much.
Next person signed up for public comment is Jonathan Klein. You've been promoted to a panelist. Your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Jonathan Klein, 150 St. Paul Street, town meeting member from Precinct 10. Thank you. I know you have a long night, so I will be very, very brief and echo what many of the previous speakers have said. I encourage you, strongly encourage you to find money, potentially from the the $1.4 million for the engineering study, which I think, frankly, does not qualify for ARPA money. It may qualify technically. I don't think it qualifies in terms of the intention of ARPA money to remedy and to address the needs of those most adversely affected by COVID, and to move that money, or at least $1 million of that money, picking up on what Liz Neal just said, to meet your own target, to the Brookline Housing Authority for desperately needed repairs that you have already heard about, many, many times in the Egmont and Trustman projects. So I urge you, I thank the work of the committee for their really good work putting together a slate, but I respectfully suggest that it can be improved, and improved by adding money to the BHA work, which will provide immediate relief for citizens of Brookline, who have been most adversely impacted by COVID. Thank you very much for your time.
That concludes public comment.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Heather, back to you.
Thank you. So we're going to jump into miscellaneous, and then I have a grand surprise for you all. Okay. So we have meeting minutes from our April 5th and April 12th meetings. Any edits or changes, thoughts, critiques? No? Okay, I will move them in omnibus fashion then. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from April 5th and April 12th meetings, please say aye. Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And now let me just read off the rest of the miscellaneous. I move accepting a grant from the Urban Areas Security Initiative under the Cybersecurity Initiative's goal area for a third-party vendor management service to manage the town of Brookline's present and prospective vendor cybersecurity posture in the amount of $25,000. Raul, did you get your questions answered from last week?
I did. For folks who heard every word Heather said and understood very little of it, my understanding is that what this grant enables us to do is to ensure that our third-party vendors are as secure as we are in protecting all the information that passes through the town, just as we do to make sure our third-party vendors are also complying. Did I get that right?
I think so.
What
Okay.
did I miss, Bernard?
Oh,
No, you
Bernard,
didn't miss anything, but I think the way to look at this is it's like it can.
is your mute? Is your
No,
thing
I'm on.
Okay, good.
It's like a consumer reports, specialized report for us based on the applications and other software that we identify for the service, and they do the research into whether they're cyber secure, the updated patches, updated encryption, et cetera. Something that we would have to do without this service. So I mean, it's a very important service, and it's really great that we have a grant to cover this.
Great. Yes. Okay. So, and then I also move the authorization for the annual use of $22,000 from the BAA funds for the Juneteenth celebration. Move approving extra work order 14 for D'Alessandro Corporation, rental rates for snow plowing and ice control in the amount of $431,562. Move accepting the Massachusetts DOER grant for 2 electric vehicles and 1 charging station in the amount of $22,500, and authorizing the town administrator to execute all related contract documents. And finally, a temporary all alcohol beverage sales license to the Hellenic Association of Boston, aka Annunciation Greek Orthodox Cathedral of Northeast, to be held on Saturday, May 21st, 2022 for a quinceañera, suite 15? Yes, from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. at 162 Goddard Ave. 150 people are expected to attend. All those in, oh, Bernard.
Yeah. Let me just say that with respect to the Juneteenth money that came in, Donnell said that we weren't as great as we should have been last year. It was a great program, and Donnell organized it significantly. And I want to just do a shout out to Donnell and just emphasize that last year was incredibly good program. So we always want to be better, but just recognize how well it went last year. So
Here.
But at any rate, aye.
Excellent. Raul.
It's a quinceañera.
Thank you. John.
Aye.
Miriam? Going to take that as an aye, and the chair votes aye.
Yes, aye.
Okay. So Devin, please bring up our special guest here tonight. So I worked on this all Friday evening. I know. We are going to play a little game of Brookline Budget Jeopardy. And you will see that there are buzzers unique to each one of you. I even gave one to Miriam before she left for her vacation. So our secret celebrity host is none other than my friend, Frank Oglesby Jr. You may recognize his voice as the voice of the T. Good evening, Frank. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Heather. Now entering Brookline. I'm your celebrity host, as Heather said, Frank Oglesby Jr. You may know me as the voice of the T, of course. Special thanks to Devin Fields and Melissa Goff for their help. Let's go over our categories today. The basics. Incoming. Things we can't control. Show me the money. And potpourri. Let's meet our players. Bernard Green, Raul Fernandez, John Van Scoyoc, and Miriam Ashkenazi. Let's go over the ground rules. Call on one of you to select a category. You will state the name of the category and the amount. A prompt will appear. If you know the answer, hit your buzzer. Heather will call on the first person to buzz. Remember to state the answer in the form of a question. In the event of a daily double, you'll be given an opportunity to place a wager. Let's get started. Let's have Chair Hamilton start us off with the first question.
Thank you so much, Frank. I pick the basics for 200.
It is neither free nor cash.
I believe I heard Raul's buzzer. Okay, Bernard.
It's free cash. What is
Free
free
cash
cash?
is correct. That is correct.
You get to pick, Bernard.
Okay, so let's see, I lost the.
Oh, wait for it to come back up.
Okay.
I'll go to answer.
Free cash.
Well, the only one I remember is potpourri, so maybe. Okay, how about potpourri for 200?
Medical, retail, consumption, delivery are all examples of this.
Bernard.
Cannabis licensing.
Correct.
Correct. Marijuana
I'm
licenses.
sorry. What are cannabis licenses issued for?
Don't forget to use your microphones, please.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Do you want to pick another category, Bernard?
Oh, okay. I'm waiting for the screen to. I have no money. Anyway,
Speak
okay, how
up.
about
Speak up.
incoming for 200 again?
Meals, excise taxes, hotel excise, pilot, parking meter fees are all examples of this funding source.
What is local revenues? Local receipts.
Very close.
That is correct. Local receipt.
For the children, for 400.
Future journalists get their start at this high school newspaper.
Bernard.
What is the Sagamore?
Bernard.
That is
Over
correct.
100 years old.
You're on a roll, Bernard.
I'm at a disadvantage here.
Okay, we'll go to you, Miriam.
I'm gonna check for the children for 100.
This body tackles the revenue share between town and schools.
Raul.
What is the town school partnership?
That's
My buzzers.
Oh, let's go with for the children for 500.
111 Cypress is now this.
Bernard.
What is the 9th grade academy of the high school?
I know the answer.
No.
Yes. Also the STEM.
And 22
STEM was
tap-in.
at the high school.
And 22 tap-ins, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll go with the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear my buzzer at all?
A little
Yes.
bit, but I think there might be a delay.
This is no fair.
Okay, yes, let's wait until Frank has read the entire question and then buzz.
Good idea.
Okay.
To
I'm-
give everybody
I'm
an
reading, not
opportunity.
listening.
Oh, I'm going to insert my chair privilege. Let's do things we can't control for 200.
Hey.
And who
Daily
made
double.
this quiz?
The name of this historic landmark.
Bernard.
I waited. John F. Kennedy Historical. What is the John F. Kennedy Historical Site?
I don't have that answer.
Birthplace, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
We'll give it to you, Bernard.
Okay.
JFK birthplace. That's interesting.
Bernard, do
I
you
don't
want
have
to
that
call the
answer.
next one?
Sorry. How about the basics, 400?
This fund will be completely funded by 2030.
What is the unfunded pension?
That's correct.
Let's go back to for the children for 600.
There is no 600.
Oh, there is no 600. All right. 200.
This figure is still disputed.
Figures.
Raul.
Is this the student to teacher ratio?
Very close.
Okay.
Show the answer.
The number.
Oh, the number of
teachers.
STs.
Oh,
That's what you
Yes,
asked
the
about.
number of
That's right.
teachers.
Raul, would you like
my.
to select?
That's an easy calculation.
All right, let's do, you know what? Show me the money for 100.
3,500, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was supposed to wait till I finish.
$3,500 for members, $4,500 for chair.
Raul.
What is the paltry sum that board members receive for their service to the town of Brookline?
And that is correct.
Thanks, Frank. Let's go with show me the money for 200.
These members are paid $50 per hearing.
This one's a hard one. Even I didn't really know this one. Bernard.
Is that the Z? What is the zoning bylaw?
Board
I'm
of-
sorry, zoning
Board of Appeals.
Board.
That is correct.
Yes.
Zoning Board of Appeals.
Go
Sorry.
for it.
Okay, how about things we can control for 300?
State aid we receive for the schools.
What is chapter 70?
That is correct.
Okay. What's left there? Oh. Okay. Truthfully, I'm having trouble reading the screen. What's the first category to the left? The basics. How about the basics for 600? 500, 500, whatever. I just so much want to make $600. I can't believe it. I told you I couldn't read the screen. The split is
The split is 83% to 17%, where the town pays for the first and the employee pays for the second.
Medical insurance.
Bernard.
Health insurance premiums.
Yep, in the form of a question.
Oh God, I am no good at this. What is the town employee benefit or health insurance split, premium split?
Excellent.
Okay.
I'm
That's
going to
true.
call on Miriam to choose a category.
Yeah, this is no fair. I've been buzzing this buzzer this whole time. I'm gonna.
I'll give
close
you my
out-
money.
Yeah, I'm gonna close out for the children for 300.
Brookline High School mascot.
Raul.
What are the Warriors?
That is correct.
Correct.
Oh, come on.
Come on.
I brought this buzzer all the way here to Jamaica.
I appreciate it, Miriam. And that's all the time we have. So I want to do a special thank you to Miriam for lugging that buzzer all the way to Jamaica. And to my friend Frank Oglesby Jr., the voice of the T.
Thank you. Thank you all. Had a good
Yay,
time.
Frank.
Thank
Enjoyed
you
it.
for joining us.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we actually have to move on to our, real business.
Okay.
Okay. Whew. So, real business is the American Rescue Plan Act first round funding, which was the subject of a lot of public comment. I understand that there was a slate that was voted on last week by the screening panel. And I think there are two other options that select board members have circled around to the rest of us through Devon as to not violate any open meeting law. Who wants to go first?
Heather, I really
Yes.
would like to just say a few words to get us started, if that's okay.
That is perfectly okay. Thank you, Miriam.
All right, so first, I just want to quickly address the two comments from public comments. First, there is a lot of overlap between some of the categories in terms of government ops, economic recovery, and vulnerable populations. So I just want to stress that the buckets are extremely subjective and were meant as a guide for us. So just to put that out there. And the second thing is, we will be kind of having an interim session where some money will be earmarked for things that we really need to spend this money on, like the actual grant administration. This is to Natalia Linos's comments. Some of that money will also be set aside specifically in case we need to ramp up pandemic response. So that is in the plans, in the works. Now, I have a few actual short remarks. I promise to keep them short. But first, I must thank the committee, Arthur, Brian, Jenny, Tyler, Melissa, and my co-chair, John. This has felt at times like a Sisyphusian task, and we are not yet done. With the hard work of the ARPA Review Committee, we evaluated 80 plus proposals asking for over $100 in funding. And the list you have before you is not a perfect list. There will never be a perfect list, but we think it represents the needs highlighted in the Brookline Community Foundation report, while also taking into consideration town needs and the requirements for spending and reporting on the ARPA funds. As a select board, I hope we remain flexible tonight when we debate and vote on this slate. All of us cannot have everything, as hard as we may try, and compromise is a requirement. Finally, to the public, thank you. Thank you for keeping our feet to the fire, for engaging with public comments, public hearing, emails, and discussions. As we continue through the process, we rely on you to continue to stay engaged. In the next few weeks, we will seek your input into how we can improve this process for the next round and continue to maintain as high a level of transparency as we can. With this said, I promised it would be short. I turn the slate of proposals to the select board to discuss. May the Hunger Games begin. That's a joke, by the way. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. So I'm inclined to support the slate that was voted on and recommended last week by the screening panel. I understand that there are two other proposals that John has come up with and that Raul has come up with. But let me just say this, when I participated in the public hearing and then our discussion, one of the things that I really liked how Miriam handled the ARPA process was to encourage people to talk about the projects that they were supporting and to not disparage other projects. And I feel like it's really hard for me to sit here with a master's degree in transportation, having worked for MassDOT, knowing what I know about transportation access, and to hear people say that the Davis Path footbridge is not a worthy way to use this money. First of all, you don't have all of the information. $1.3 million does seem like a lot, but when you understand that it could potentially open up $10 million of federal money that we will not be able to come up with because we will not have a design before the ARPA money goes away. So we need access to other money. And the only way we can do that is if we have a design ready to go. And with all due respect, $300,000 is not enough to design a project this complicated over the T, as we have experienced with the high school project. And then with regard to another proposal that I think John is floating, if you don't understand, one of the projects, i.e. the utilities, that's fine. But I don't see the point in disparaging something that one of your other select board members has deemed a worthy cause. So before we kind of get into the thoughts, I just wanted to put all of that out there and see if you both feel strongly about presenting your proposals compared to the one that was voted on Friday.
I'm happy to comment. Yeah, I don't like to think of what I will say about the utilities proposal as disparaging it. I'm simply doing what I think we all have to do in our position as select board members, and that is think critically about this. We're talking about very significant sums of money. And if for any reason, there's one member of the board who has some different opinions about whether the $614,246.82, is a proposal worthy of funding, I think that member, and that happens to be me, should express those doubts and explain why. And that's all I intend to do tonight. I don't mean them to be a criticism of my colleague. I just mean them to be a criticism of the proposal. And without critical thinking, we could end up with some, proposals getting very large sums of money which have not really kind of met the threshold of sort of factual information that warrants the expenditure.
Anybody else that would like to make a comment? Raul and then Bernard.
Yeah, Raul, go first.
No, I think what we do here tonight need not be adversarial. That I think we can just have a conversation about it. We may end up right back at the same place where we started, which is the slate that's been proposed by the subcommittee, and we may, end up making some adjustments to this. I think it's important for folks to hear, at a very minimum, whether or not we have the votes to make changes, what it is that we think about is in front of us and where we might like to see monies allocated differently. And again, even if not for this round, for the next round, I do think that one thing we have to think very critically about before voting tonight is and I want to make sure I'm reading it as it was, I'm reading it right, is compared to what the targets we set, the underfunding relative to the vulnerable populations target versus the overfunding of government operations and capital economic recovery. And it looks like we're still under on technology. But I think we have the potential to leave tonight with a really good story about how Brookline allocated its funding. I think what could undercut that really good story, because there's so much in here I agree with. What really could undercut that story is that item right there is underfunding vulnerable populations, even relative to the target that we set for ourselves. I think that would be a bad part of the story.
Bernard and then Miriam.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few comments about the specific applications, but I also want to make sure that before any MOU is entered into with the various applicants, that the select board has an opportunity to review those and make sure we're comfortable with the MOUs. Yeah, that relates to a number of issues that came up with respect to how, for example, the school money is going to be spent, whether it's going to be for teachers to save teachers or some other purpose. And, the MOU will give us some guidance there. Secondly, I'd like to, this is not on the slate, but I just want to say something about one of the applications, and that's the Council of Aging proposal to increase the social worker time from part-time to full-time. And, I'm not suggesting we put it back on the slate, but I would urge the committee to look at that in the next round and look at specifically the application form, because they've done something that is a little unusual. And that is the justification for the full-time social worker is explained in excruciating detail, specific things that this person will do to help the elderly population with specific issues that they have. So, hopefully next round, they'll get money at least for increasing the social worker from part-time to full-time. Thirdly, utilities. I have a problem with the utility proposal in that we're giving money to the utilities as if we really trust them. Again, I'm willing to go with that, given that we're going to have an MOU that gives them some guidance and some requirements with respect to showing that the households that they're helping really qualify for the aid. Now, they may balk at that. Their lawyers may say, we're not going out on that limb. And, we're back at coming up with an alternative proposal, which I still think would be the Brookline Center. They have the infrastructure ready to go forward with this. But let's see if we can, get it done, the way that's currently set up. And finally, Davis Path footbridge. I agree with the chair on this issue, but also I think it's very, very dangerous and unfortunate for us to be pitting one group of residents against another, even on something as sort of as small as the Davis Path footpath bridge. we all have been hurt by the pandemic. If we start getting into fights over who's been hurt the most and who's more deserving on a situation like, or on a project like this, I think, no matter what your views are with respect to the balance of balance is it's bad. It's a bad way for the town to be functioning, because we can't have different communities seeing themselves as in a zero-sum game with respect to funding like this. So those are my only comments.
Thank you, Bernard. Miriam?
Thank you, Heather. So to address a few things, actually riffing off of Bernard, the first I would say is, just to be clear, we will have, and Bernard said it, but just to really be clear about it, we will have MOUs, we will have grant agreements with all of the grantees. And I do think that is a very important piece of the process, both for us and for the grantees. The second, though, is I take a different view, Bernard, on the utilities. I think, as somebody who, got my community granting experience, I think that
you broke off.
Oh, I worked for Oxfam for many years, which works in poverty reduction. And my experience is that if we can take a step or two out of the process and people who are already really, I think, at their limit, stretched to their limit, if they're not able to pay their utility bills, by definition, they're stretched to their limit, and not make them have to then go down someplace, fill out an application, right? If we can directly pay the utilities with the MOU, I agree, it's win-win, because you know what the utilities want? They want to get paid. That's what they want. They're not going to say no to getting paid. So I'm a big fan of this proposal, the utilities proposal. So I just want to put that out there. At the same time, I'm going to put my flag in the sand. And this is where I didn't speak up as much as co-chair of the committee, because I wanted to make sure committee members really had the floor. But personally, I feel like we could find other money for the Davis footbridge, or we could even put it off to the second phase, or we could critically look at 1.3 or 1.4, whatever it is, seems like a lot to me. I'd rather see that money go someplace else. It's not that I don't think it's an important thing for us to fund. I just think for this money, we have higher priorities. So that's where I stand on these topics.
Mel, would you like to say something about the Davis Path footbridge?
Sure. I just want to. Thank you, Madam Chair. I fully respect the advisory committee and the select board's discretion about their priorities. So I'm not advocating one thing over another. I will say that the idea behind the Davis Path footbridge was to make it shovel ready. So we cannot access federal infrastructure or other funding that we think will be available for construction of this footbridge, which will cost $12 to $15 million. So just to be clear, a path like that going over an active MBTA rail line with all the complications that entails. So that was the idea, is to use the ARPA funds to leverage other federal funds. It's possible we could get the next round, or I don't know where there's other funding for the design at this point. So, there is no other immediate available funding available for that.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments? Okay. John, and then I would like to address some of the questions that I see in the Q&A.
Thank you again, Chair, and thank you everyone for putting up with what I admit, I'm sort of the fly in the ointment here, because when I took another look at the results of the work of the screening committee this morning, and the letters that we got from people pleading for additional monies to be allocated to the Brookline Housing Authority, I had to confess that I could find some items on the list of approved slate items on the slate that I thought were less worthy than giving another $1 million to the Housing Authority. And so I'm going to explain that right now and ask your indulgence as I explain the process that I went through to come to that conclusion. But before I do, I wanted to just say that my colleague Raul Fernandez and I agree on giving an additional $1 million to the Brookline Housing Authority. That's what this discussion tonight is all about. Having agreed to that, I knew that I should at least make an effort at finding the $1 million somewhere else on the slate. That's how you deal with budgets. And we've got a budget here that we're trying to stay within. We were originally trying to meet a $20 million target. We're now over that. We're at about 21.5. And I thought, to be credible about this, I can't just say add $1 million to the Brookline Housing Authority. I've got to say where that would come from. And so I looked at the slate, and these are two items which this is not news. I argued against including these items in the slate in my role on the screening committee as a co-chair with Miriam, who so ably conducted the meetings. I did not prevail. That doesn't mean that my view of this goes away. And the select board review of the screening committee's work exists for a reason. It's so that colleagues who were not on the screening committee can have a say, but it's also so people such as myself from the select board who were on the screening committee, if we disagree with our wonderful colleagues on the screening committee and feel it's our duty as members of the select board to point out a couple of flaws in the list that was the consensus list of that screening committee, then we must speak. And so that's what I'm doing now. And here is my point. As I say, first of all, I agree we should give an additional $1 million to the Brookline Housing Authority. I think that their needs are well known. And they did ask initially for $16 million. Just about everyone who has looked at this situation, including some very good citizens of this town, some of whom spoke tonight, who have actually been in the units, will tell you even 16 is barely scratching the surface of the needs of the Housing Authority. So let's add an extra $1 million to the Housing Authority, but let's do it in a way that is fiscally sound. Let's say what we don't think should get funded. And I then looked for two big ticket items, that one or two that might add up to around $1 million. And I've had doubts about this utility proposal from the outset. And I'll give you a list of reasons why. First of all, it comes from an individual, and the individual happens to be my esteemed colleague to my right. But it's very rare on this list of approved projects, approved proposals, to find one that simply was one individual's idea that then suddenly became a proposal that would get over $600,000. Others will disagree with me on my view of this idea and whether it's worthy, but here's what I find wrong with this idea. First of all, who receives this money? Is this going to basically go to Eversource to spend as they choose on whatever accounts they say are delinquent and deserve the money to cover their delinquent debts on their accounts? Well, we've heard it's Brookline accounts. Well, that's fine. But this proposal offers no actual vetting of who gets the subsidy, who gets the relief, and who doesn't in terms of need. So I went to the Eversource site, and it turns out Eversource for a long time has had programs to deal with people who have trouble paying their utility bills. And good for them. I'm glad they do. And here's what they do when they have a customer who's having a problem keeping up with the payments on a bill. They review the account billing history. They set a monthly budgeted payment based on the average of the regular monthly bill. And this is a program called New Start, by the way. And then when those customers start making their New Start monthly payments, a portion of their past due balance is eliminated or forgiven, reducing the amount they owe. The amount forgiven each month is calculated by taking your total past due balance and dividing it by 12. Then as long as you continue making these payments, you become a customer in good standing and your overdue amount is wiped off the books. That's a pretty good program. You know why? Because it gets the customer on a schedule where the customer remains a customer and has their utility needs met. What is being offered tonight for us to fund through ARPA funding is a program that simply, without regard to individuals and the amount they owe or their circumstances, without any of the vetting that Eversource does to distinguish those most in need from those least in need, the program we're proposing tonight just says, wipe the slate clean of a whole bunch of overdue bills. Well, what happens the next month after that and the next month after that? Have any of those people been brought into a situation where they now can make their payments for their utilities on a regular basis? Or have they just been led to believe that the problem will be taken care of by the town of Brookline every time they fall behind in their utility bills? So that's one big problem with this program. Second big problem is there any precedent for actually doing this by turning money over to, let's say, the Brookline Community Foundation to work with the Brookline Community Mental Health Center to provide relief to people who come to the Brookline Community Mental Health Center and say, I'm having trouble paying my utility bills? Well, the precedent actually is there, except that the Brookline Community Foundation doesn't presently have a role in it. They've never done anything like this. Who would we give the money to? Not them currently, unless they decide to step up and become somehow a vetter of who should get this money. But then once it's turned over to the Brookline Community Mental Health Center to deal with utility customers who say they have need, what has happened in the past? Because they're already doing that. So I asked the question when we addressed this at the last screening committee meeting, how much actually in arrears has been paid out in the past year? And the answer that came from the head of the Brookline Community Foundation is under $10,000. So if there's an existing program of relief that only requires funding of $10,000 a year, why would we suddenly, with ARPA money, turn this into a $600,000 plus program with no regard to who gets the money, no regard to how those customers are going to pay their bills in the future, and without actual indications of interest by Eversource or by the Brookline Community Foundation? So again, I just find too many flaws in this proposal to warrant it being still on the slate. And I think you heard it said tonight, that, yeah, we all feel awkward criticizing a proposal that comes from a fellow member of this board. But guess what? I didn't even know individual members of this board could make their own applications for ARPA money. I didn't make one. I don't think any of the other members of the board made one. And good for our colleague. He stuck his neck out. He made one. But I don't think it should get any more deference than any proposal that comes from the community or from a department or from the schools. So that's 600 some odd thousand that I think we could save. The other 350,000, don't worry, I'm not going to make a big speech about this other proposal. 360,000 is, excuse me, for what is known as a disparity study. And I am one of those people who has a conviction when I look at government, and now that I've been in the middle of it, and sometimes think that the way we do things takes too long, costs too much money, is too complicated, and is too prone to turning to consultants to provide answers when we know the answers ourselves. And this is a classic situation. We know what the problem is in terms of minority business enterprises, women-owned business enterprises, and the town's procedures of letting out contracts and employing people to do services. The problem is those minority-owned enterprises and women-owned enterprises aren't getting a sufficient share of the business. But would that be solved if we spent $350,000 to pay a consultant to tell us we have a problem? I don't think so. And so I just haven't seen a good case made for that money. You take that money, you take the utility money, you add it together, and we've now got over $1 million to add to the Brookline Housing Authority. And I hope there's 3 votes. If there's not, there's not. But that is why I am making this proposal tonight. Thanks.
Okay, that's a lot for me to remember. I want to call on Raul because it is his proposal, but I'll just say this. Getting rid of the disparity study is a non-starter for me for a couple of reasons. I believe Melissa Goff wants this in, and she is an exemplary employee. And if I don't, if I recall correctly, the city of Boston actually got into trouble for not having a disparity study. This is
correct.
Step 1 in a very long procurement process. So striking it is really biting our nose off to spite our face. The utility thing, I'm going to let Raul address it. My own initial thoughts are, we know exactly who would be paid. They have the names of the customers. This is federal money. They will have to report how they spent it. But Raul.
Yeah, let's just say 2 things. Maybe what Bernardo is about to say is that the disparity study is legally required to be able to do the kinds, and frankly, this has been explained to us on the board numerous times, that it is legally required for us to do the kinds of things that we as a board have said we want to do, relative to directing more of our funds toward minority and women-owned businesses. I don't know what else to say about that. As far as the utility study goes, I think if you were just tuning in and just listened to my colleague John Van Scoyac talk about this proposal, you would have thought it was done on the back of a napkin. In fact, this proposal was put together after having meetings with the folks from Eversource and National Grid, including town staff, and having followed up for even more data. As much as you see presented, when you look into the ARPA proposals, you'll see a written out proposal as well as a spreadsheet here that also offers, all kinds of information and options to the board should the board or the subcommittee would have wanted to take those options. I want to note this is that there's a really important report, if anybody's interested in this and digging in more into this, from the National Consumer Law Center that looks at the impact of COVID-19 on utility debt in Massachusetts specifically. And there's, the same I imagine is true across the country, but this is Massachusetts specific data. And that there are for very low income, as I like to say, underpaid customers of these utilities, there are programs that support them when they're in debt. And that is part of the reason why you see, when you look at the number of those on what they call the discount or low income rate, you see those numbers are quite smaller. Take a listen to this from the NCLC. Well, first, my own words. Fully funding this proposal will provide relief to both low income and, importantly, moderate income residents. As the NCLC report explains, quote, "The health and financial impacts of COVID-19 have created a new class of residential customers who cannot afford to pay their bills and who are often unaware of the various programs that can help them pay those bills." So when we look, end quote, when we look at, how much utility debt has been paid out, and by the way, I have from the safety net program the exact amounts. They were much higher than maybe what you heard off the cuff at a meeting on Friday. In fact, from from Megan Smith over at the Brookline Center, which actually administers, not the Brookline Community Foundation, but the Brookline Center, which administers the utility, the safety net program. During the beginning of the pandemic, we were spending close to $12K per quarter on utilities, and last quarter it rose close to that level again for the first time. And so utility debt is becoming a real issue for Brookline residents. Why is this important, and why does it deserve to have it funded in this way? It is because despite our best efforts, not everybody knows that the safety net exists. There are over 1,000 Brookline families. By the way, according to Eversource, there are 1,125 Brookline households that are in utility debt. National Grid cites 753. Now, assuming complete overlap, if you're in gas debt, you're in electricity debt, there are at least over 1,000 families, potentially as high as 1,800 families in Brookline that are in debt right now. And by the way, there's been a moratorium. This is the other critical piece that I know Jenny Raitt brought up in the subcommittee. There's been a moratorium on shutting off utilities, which means that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, utility companies have allowed a lot more flexibility and not started to send shutoff notices. That moratorium ends at the end of this month. And starting in May, Brookline residents, by the way, these are all active Brookline resident customers. That means not folks who piled up debt and moved out of Brookline. They currently live in Brookline right now. These are our neighbors who are in debt. And this will wipe out that debt. Why? It's the same argument that folks make. Well, what about next time? And they'll just end up in more debt and expect us to pay the bill. I want to ignore that argument, frankly, because I said this needed to be adversarial, and I'm going to try not to make it be, and just focus on the merits of the proposal in front of us. Folks that are in debt, and I've been in debt before, folks that are in debt, it is a cycle that gets worse and worse and worse. And when you can't pay your light and your electricity and your gas bill, you end up in real trouble. Folks take that money, and instead you got to pay the first thing. The first thing out the door has to be the rent, because you got to have a place to live. And you try to figure out how to pay everything else afterwards. And so this debt accrues, and then you end up in this cycle where you leave it, and then it becomes unmanageable for you. Here we have the average debt. By the way, this is all in the proposal, folks. This was not done on the back of a napkin. The average debt for Eversource customers is $357. When you look at the average debt for low-income customers is actually $634. For National Grid, the average debt for Brookline residents is $281. When you look at low-income residents, it's $493. Right? Now imagine being someone who is one of our neighbors that utilizes support from the Brookline Center, utilizes support from the food pantry and elsewhere, and having a bill of $493. How you gonna pay that? How you gonna pay that? It's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And, these are folks that, like I mentioned, some folks that aren't, what you don't see represented here, and why the numbers, especially for low-income residents, are so low, is because utilities are included for BHA residents, right? So if you live in public housing, you're not going to be captured here. And that's a good thing. I'm glad that's the case. But you have to understand that there are a lot of people in Brookline. I think through our conversation, some people may have gotten the mistaken impression that all poor people in Brookline live in public housing, and that ain't the case. Or all people who are in debt in Brookline live in public housing, and that ain't the case. There's a lot of other people here that would be helped by this proposal. So I'm going to stop there. I think this proposal stands on its merits. Like I said, it is there and available, including all the numbers for anyone to see. The work has been done. I think Bernard's point stands for all the proposals, that each and every one of these are going to have to include some MOU, some reporting, because we have to report to the federal government and be good stewards of these dollars. And Heather's point that yes, we are going to know and be able to verify that these accounts were actually had their debt cleared through this process. There cannot be any other way. It needs to be that way. So I'll stop there, and hopefully we can move on. Can I say one more thing? Yeah. Sorry. The only thing I'll say is this: is the big issue we have here that I think that we do have to figure out is, are we going to vote tonight on a slate that underfunds the vulnerable populations category by $1 million? Because I don't want to do that. And the only proposal I've heard so far is to move money from one vulnerable population category to another. And that ain't gonna do it. That ain't gonna do it. And so I'll leave it there.
May I comment on that?
Hold on. I'm about to throw out an idea, which honestly, I guess I'm kind of struggling why, John, you automatically ruled this out, because I think all five of us are very empathetic to the idea of, everyone that has voiced support for BHA. So why don't we just up the amount?
Well, that wasn't offered to us as an alternative. It was urged on us that we try to stay within the 22, 21, ideally 20. But, if the thinking on that has changed, go ahead and up the amount. If you don't mind, I'd just like to make a comment on the vulnerable populations thing, because frankly, I think that is a misperception that I can understand why it might exist in the public. I cannot understand why it would exist within a member of the select board. Do the schools serve vulnerable populations? Because they are down here for $3 million or 3.5, and they are listed as a government entity. They're not listed as vulnerable population serving. And I'd find it very surprising if anyone made the argument schools don't serve vulnerable populations. So unfortunately, there's just been a misunderstanding about whether the buckets, so-called, are where they should be. If you put the school's money into vulnerable populations, you would find the buckets are pretty much exactly where they should be. So let's just put that argument aside. And finally, I would just like to ask a question. Have we checked with legal counsel as to whether the town can use taxpayer monies to pay the utility bills of people?
I'm looking at you, Joe, but while you're trying to figure out how to answer that question, I'll call on Miriam.
Okay, I'm going to take a real deep breath here. So first, I am not going to set aside the comment about the schools serving vulnerable populations. When we talk about a bucket of serving vulnerable populations, we talk about predominantly vulnerable populations. And I really think it would be a hard argument to say that the majority of the students in our school system qualify as vulnerable populations. And I say that as a parent with 2 kids in the school system. So no, I don't think those are equivalencies, John. I do think that money goes exactly in the bucket it goes in. The second thing I will say, and I just really have to say it, I just think, and I don't mean to attack you, John, but I really feel like these comments come from a place where not being able to pay a utility bill is something you've never had to face. I mean, it's just not that easy. And I think that taking that kind of pressure off of somebody's budget is hugely important. And it goes a really long way to make meeting next month's bills. So I really think instead of, all of the steps that if all of these wonderful steps the utility companies had in place were working so well, there wouldn't be so much utility debt. So clearly there's a flaw in the system that we're trying to address. And I fully support this. And I don't really care if it was Raul who submitted it. I think it's a great proposal, period, end of story. And I'm just going to reiterate that, yes, we did hear that the disparity study is a legally required step for us to do what needs to be done next, that Cambridge has done it, Somerville has done it. We are trying to find ways to piggyback on that so that we don't have to spend as much money, but it needs to be done. So I want to speak to Heather's proposal for adding an extra $1 million, and I'm just going to apologize to you, Mel, in advance. Thumbs up, I'm all for it. I think that BHA, that need is there. I think this money is for exactly that. I would be more than comfortable with just putting more money into that BHA allotment, and thumbs up to the rest of the slate.
So I'm going to call on Joe first and sure, Bernard first and then Joe.
The question is not, can we use taxpayer money to pay, ARPA money to pay households? We clearly can. I think the question that someone asked is, can we use ARPA money to pay directly to a utility, right? Now, regulations don't talk about utility, they talk about households. I think that's
So the concern I have, and I haven't looked at this specific proposal, is this concept in public finance law about not prior public use, about the idea of using public money for private benefit. So the idea, there is a federal program that's allowed, like low-income house oil heat. So if the program is shifted more towards that, then I think that's permissible. But you have a problem with municipal finance restrictions on using public funds for the benefit of private individuals. The public use has to be greater, and the benefit to the private individual must be incidental. So that, now I'm still not remembering the
Aid and credit, I think is what you're looking for.
yeah, it's like private.
Anti-aid.
Yeah, it's the not prior public use, it's public use doctrine. Sorry, there we go. The public use doctrine. So if you take in taxpayer money, it has to be used for a public use. The idea that my salary is to my benefit. Well, the public use of the hours I put into this job, the public gets that, and the incidental benefit to me of that salary that comes to me, the individual, is outweighed by the hours that I put into public service. So this public use doctrine limits public money that has a greater benefit to the private individual than the public. So like I said, LIHEAP is a permissible program, and that's where public money is used to buy heating oil for residents, with the idea that the public benefit of someone not being cold during the winter outweighs the incidental benefit of that oil tank of gas for that personal homeowner. So if the project is structured more like LIHEAP, I'd feel more comfortable, but I could see you running into problems with the public use doctrine if it's created in some other ways. So I'd like to take a look at it to make sure it's more along LIHEAP and not run afoul of the public use doctrine.
Thank you. I think Mel also had something to add.
Well, I think it's a tough spot for Joe to get put in at this time. I don't think he's fully aware of the particular proposal. And I think what we're talking about is use of ARPA funds. It's an act of Congress, and there is detailed United States Treasury regulations. And, obviously we're not going to fund things that aren't eligible. It's been pointed out that agreements would have to be reached, and if they're not legal, they won't be reached. I think it's just kind of premature to make a final judgment at this point.
Bernard?
Yeah. Okay, on the issue of whether we want to take $1 million from somewhere and give it to BHA, the question is, where is it coming from? I mean, John came up with a proposal for at least $614,000 of it. But, from my standpoint, I think that the committee did a really great job of coming up with not a perfect proposal, but a good proposal, a reasonable proposal. Priorities do not mean, when you prioritize, it does not mean that you expend all the money on the top priorities and nothing on the bottom priorities. You sort of balance out over different projects. Some get a lot, and some get just a little bit of what they want. So I would stick with the slate that came out of the committee hearing the other day. I mean, it's not a perfect slate, but a lot of things on there I would not want to fund. But it's a slate that I think that we got, and it's we should go with it, or got from a serious process, and we should go with it.
Okay, so I have read the Treasury documents a lot for work because there's a lot of grant funding in there. And I have not seen anything particularly that would give me pause to think that the proposal regarding the utilities is something that would be ineligible. Now, I could be wrong, and we will have it double checked. We have a staff member now, Tyler, who is, part of our staff now, and he will reread the regulations, and he will work with Joe to make sure that, this is something that is completely eligible. So I guess for me, the question is, Do we go with the original proposal that the committee voted last Friday? Or do we add like the last $1 million that BHA is in need of and just take care of that so that we're not having to deal with it in round two? Now, round two, so let me back up. The whole process has been to date that we convened a screening panel with 3 people that were not on select board, co-chaired by John and Miriam, who are on the select board. And they have been meeting every Friday afternoon for hours to try to go through the proposals, of which we had like 80 proposals, and then to rank them, and then to come up with a slate that would be recommended to us for consideration. The goal was to stay within about half of our allotment, which is about $20 million. And the second allotment, we will take in a few weeks. We will go through a very similar process, learning from this process and doing 2.0 process. But there's nothing to say that we can't spend more than $20 million. We're the select board. We make the rules. So I am totally willing to go with the proposed slate from last Friday. I think that that is what reached consensus from all of the hard work of not only the committee members, but the 2 co-chairs on the select board. Or we take that proposal and we add another $1 million to BHA. So I'd like to hear thoughts on that, Raul.
I'd support doing that. Is this gets us past sort of back and forths about this program versus that one. It puts us in alignment with where we said we would be around vulnerable populations, and it gets us to a vote. So I would support that, yes. And by that, I mean adding $1 million to BHA and then taking a vote.
I see Miriam's hand up, and then Bernard, do you want to say something? No?
No, I was just, I misunderstood what Raul was saying. I thought
And then he clarified.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Miriam.
I support that. I mean, we use the 20 million as a bumper, as a guide, but it is not, it's not a rule. So I think that I think it's a great idea, and I totally support it also.
So now from John and Bernard. Bernard has his finger up.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm a little uncomfortable just adding another $1 million to BHA, since in my view, another, not $1 million maybe, but 500,000 to the safety net fund also would deal with really serious problems that people are having, because that's where people go or can go when everything else is falling apart, both for utility bills, for food aid, for you name it. So I'm not sure why we're giving $1 million to BHA and not a similar amount to the safety net fund. I'm still with the original slate because it's not perfect, but it's very good.
John?
Well, I'm feeling, on the one hand, glad that I raised some questions and that we got to this point in the discussion. And on the other hand, I'm sort of feeling like, did we really make any progress? I could support adding the $1 million to the BHA and just let it go at that. But I hope everybody realizes that that's $1 million that we won't have for ARPA proposals a year from now. So, math is unfortunately not something that can be ignored. And all we're doing here by adding the $1 million now is taking away $1 million that we would have available to add next year. And my whole point in raising these troubling issues, I mean, these difficult to sort of deal with issues, especially between colleagues, was if you want to get a net addition of money for the BHA, the way to do it is to look for flawed proposals that perhaps don't warrant the money that is allocated to them. I think I've raised some significant questions about my colleague's proposal. Others see the benefit of giving money on a one-time only basis to people who are in debt. There's a lot of kinds of debt. Utility debt is just one of them. I don't quite understand the precedent we're setting by becoming sort of the debt relief agency for people in unknown places for unknown reasons. But if we can do it once with 600 and some odd $1,000, I suppose in order to get consensus on this board, we'll just have to bow to that inevitability. I think we could have better spent that money at the BHA, to be honest with you.
Well, you'll get your opportunity to vote on that. You know, do I love the utility proposal? No. However, like the scooter pilot program that a lot of people hated, we got a lot of really good data out of that. And I suspect that we are going to get a lot of really interesting data through this. We may not know what it is yet, but on the other side, we'll be able to understand how this affected Brookline residents that we just can't anticipate right now. So I'm willing to do it because it is important to a colleague and because I think we're going to learn something very useful for the future. So Bernard is hesitating about adding an extra $1 million, but I'll say this.
No, I want the original slate. I'm not. there's no
Right.
hesitation there.
Yeah. Miriam, you have your hand up, but okay, go.
I just want to clarify something for Bernard. Bernard, the safety net fund ask was funded to its full ask. They did get the extra 500K. So that has been given to them in the final slate.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's good.
I was thinking of giving them more, but but maybe they can't absorb more. So
Be
I don't think-
careful. Too much of a good thing sometimes.
We didn't give anybody more than they asked for any single proposal.
So hold on, let me gather my thoughts. It was always my intention that we would try to address the $16 million that the BHA was requesting through phase 1 and through phase 2. If we do it in phase 1, like John says, it's simple math. We just don't have that money for phase 2. I'm okay with that. I don't know if everybody else is okay with that, but I suspect that more people on this board are okay with that than not. So I think that might be the way to get consensus. Bernard?
on what?
So we would take the slate that was voted by the screening panel last Friday, which they also upped the amount, $1 million, correct? So now it's at 15, or no, it's like 5, it's 5, but it's gonna leverage money.
Yeah.
Okay, so then this would be 6 million of the ARPA money going to BHA. Do you have any questions, Bernard?
No, I understand what you're
Okay.
doing. I don't think it's a good idea. So
Okay, so it sounds like we would have 4 yes votes if I suggested that. But if I suggested the original slate from last Friday, would everyone support that?
Well, I would support it if there was a third vote. I mean,
I support the extra million.
I shouldn't be holding my finger on the button like that. Yeah, I would support the slate from last Friday. But again, I mean, is it a meaningful vote or is it just one that, is it destined to be defeated? I'm not sure.
well, we can see. I mean,
Raul.
Well, a couple of things. One is I think for the reasons I mentioned earlier, I think adding the 1 million, an additional $1 million toward BHA is wise. I understand exactly what Bernard is saying about the safety net, which is, being funded at $1 million. And frankly, there's not enough money that we could put in there to meet the long-term needs. We've been hearing from the Brookline Center that by the end of this month, the safety net is about to be back down to 0. So I don't think there's enough money that we can put in there. The thing about the safety net, and I'm going to have the last word on my proposal, John, not you, but the thing about the safety net program is the same thing with utilities. Is what it does is it puts money into people's pockets, and we are fine having people wait in line to get food and to get other kinds of support. And the thing that people need is money so that they can make decisions about what they do with it, and whether or not it needs to go to buy, a backpack for their kid, or whether or not it needs to go to food, or whether or not it needs to go to something else that is critical for them, not the things that we've decided that we're willing to give them. They need money. The safety net program clears some of their debt, whether it be related to housing or utilities. This utility debt proposal will do the exact same thing, and it frees up those families to do what they think is necessary for them and their families. So I think it's really important. Now, the only reason I would say put the money in the BHA right now over adding more to the safety net is two reasons. One, I think we're going to keep adding money to that safety net, whether it be through CDBG or other sources. We need to, we have to. And frankly, I've had the safety net as my signature for the last 3 years, encouraging people to give money to the safety net. And individually, we should still continue to do that as people who live in this town. Those of us who have the privilege to be able to donate money should continue donating money there. And I know that we're going to keep funding that. The BHA repairs, it is so bad and so far behind. This is one thing we agree on, is that there is no amount of money. We can give them the entire 20 million and it won't cover what they need. But the more we can give them, the more the BHA can invest in residents that have been waiting far too long for the things that we, the privileged in Brookline, and I can't even call myself privileged, but those of us that are able to live in clean, habitable environments is what I'm talking about. Take for granted. And so that's why I think it's so important that we put additional monies right now so that they can put those projects to work. They can plan on getting those projects done. Anyway, I'm going to stop there, but I think this is the right thing to do. And the ARPA subcommittee too is gonna have to deal with $1 million less.
John, we really need to move on.
Oh yeah, I get
really
it, and I wouldn't even be giving you that look if not for the fact that I wanted to say something nice about Raul and about this board. I think people watching tonight might not realize that it was not too long ago when we had to make a decision on when should we schedule the ARPA vote, and I initiated the idea that we needed to have it before May 3rd, the election day, which is the day that we will then lose Raul as a member of this board, so that he could have his say. And the reason is I absolutely think that the proposal he brought on utilities is coming from a good place. It's coming from the best of places. I hope some people tonight maybe were convinced that there's a lot of questions about it. And they're very important questions because they challenge us to figure out what exactly is the role of town government versus state versus federal. And, can we be sure to sort of stay in our lane in terms of all of the needs that we have to fund, but needs that we have not funded traditionally and are all of a sudden being asked to fund. And I think you have to have a very high bar when you get into needs that we have not traditionally funded. And all I was trying to say is I don't think that we met the bar on this one, but I want to go along with either the original proposal or the proposal plus 1 million for BHA.
I'd like to call on Bernard.
Okay, and I'll be very quick. I'll try. My reason for not just adding more money to BHA is that you were funding specific projects that have specific budgets, as I recall. In the precinct 2, the 2 projects that had trust fund estates, and the other one I can't remember. And CDBG funded a specific project in the High Street Veterans buildings that dealt with specific issues. Now we're adding additional money without, I guess I don't know, that there's actually a plan that will enable them to use that additional money, except for sort of general expenses, for an additional program that they can start, or whether it's just more money that they'll have to figure out how to use. So I mean that's why I think it's best to go with the existing slate, which has been thought through very carefully. They looked at the projects that BHA that were being asked for. And I think it's a good outcome. So that's why I would stick with it.
I definitely appreciate your words, Bernard. If there was anyone else besides Michael Alperin as the executive director, I would probably share your reservations.
And I agree with that, by the way.
Michael will use these funds responsibly. I am sure.
I'm not concerned about them being used responsibly, but whether there are plans already now that can use that $1 million as opposed to just have it wait around until there's a sufficient amount of money to actually engage in a project or to start a project.
And I'm saying, I think Michael knows exactly how he would use that money if it was immediately available. So it looks like there are probably going to be 4 votes for this. So
why don't we vote on the original first, and then vote on the amended one.
I want to, she wants us to do the extra $1 million, and I think that's probably the one that is going to win. Is that okay, Bernard?
Oh, that's okay. I mean, I'll just put in my 2 cents for the record, and
think about joining. Okay, so I'm going to move that the slate that was proffered by the hardworking screening committee, co-chaired by John Van Scoyac and Miriam Ashkenazi on the select board, plus an additional $1 million to BHA, be voted by this select board, favorable action. All those in favor? Bernard.
Okay, subject to receiving and reviewing the MOU, which we will get, to make sure that $1 million is not going to just be sitting around waiting for something to be, done with it. I'll vote yes.
Thank you. Raul.
Let me just say, let's not lose sight of all the good that we're doing tonight. These were important conversations to have and for us to have a back and forth on, but we are doing some really important things for people directly, for nonprofits in our community that desperately need this support, for the business community as well. And we are really revitalizing our own town government in a way that's going to benefit all Brookline residents, especially those that need it most. So with that, I will say aye.
John.
I'm very happy to vote for this. And so I say aye as well.
Miriam.
So I just have to say to Bernard, the original BHA proposal was for 16 million. This gets them to 16 million. The 6 million from us unlocks 10 million, 16 million. So I think they have plans to spend it since that was their original proposal. And I enthusiastically vote yes.
Thank you. And the chair votes aye. Great. So we have at least phase 1 allocated. Thank you. And we will keep people updated with what phase 2 looks like as soon as I have an opportunity to really think about it. Okay, so moving on to the next agenda item before we probably lose Miriam is the town administrator update. I am chairing that initiative, and I have contracted with a consulting firm, Bernie Lynch and Associates. They have been working with me to try to get a job description drafted that has been circulated to the board. It's pretty standard. The one thing that I just didn't really know how to tackle was whether or not we put clearly what the base salary should be, or if we just say based on qualifications. I feel like I know that there's like a gender lens to this, and I can't quite figure out if we put a number, does that help people start from the same place? Or does that anchor some people lower than what they would have asked for? Or if we leave it nebulous, then does that have a disproportionate effect? I'm not sure. So what are other people's thoughts on this particular issue? Oh, yes. And Sharon from Bernie Lynch and Associates is here to answer any specific questions, but let's tackle this first. Bernard.
Yeah, I guess my concern with, sorry.
My apologies, it's Paradigm, the consulting firm.
My concern with putting it as subject to qualifications, or however you said that, is that there's always going to be a question. You know, if a woman comes forward, was she given a different salary than would have been given to a man? There's always going to be that question there, and it's a question based on, you know, history as well as other things. So I think putting in a specific salary for that reason makes sense, but you know, there may be other factors to consider.
Raul?
I want to weigh in, but I noticed that Miriam has her hand up first.
Oh, thank you. Miriam.
Thank you. I'm just like overwhelmed right now. I just have to say that. I think we should list a salary range. I think that it's a good practice. And also, I think as you alluded to, Heather, or not alluded to, you directly said, it actually, I think when you think about minority and gender applications, the data is quite clear that listing a salary range helps with equity. So I'm a big fan of listing a salary range.
Thank you. Raul.
I would just agree with that. Does that get at the salary range versus starting salary address the issue as in your mind?
Well, so what they proposed to do was do a number and then put a plus. And so that's why I paused, because, you know, a shrewd negotiator will know that that's a base. But then I could see other people say, oh, I'll stay around that range. So I'm just not sure which one is the correct way to, I mean, I guess we could do the high end range. I really keep going back and forth. So I really wanted the board's input on this because I'm not really sure what the right answer is.
I'll just say putting a dollar figure or a range, I think, is really important for people to know about what they might get paid if they do this work. I think that saves us a lot of time too. Even though we have heard that sometimes people have gone through the entire process, get offered a job, and then somehow are even when the number was posted, are still surprised about what it pays. I think for a job like this, we're looking for well-experienced people that know probably about what something like this might pay, but what Brookline's paying versus what another town in Massachusetts might be paying could be wildly different. So I think letting them know up front about the dollar figure would be helpful in whatever way.
Great, thank you. John, did you want to say something?
Oh, I'm just thinking about this. I mean, on the one hand, obviously, if someone came along who, you know, was for whatever reason, in whatever capacity, making more than what we have sort of established as the salary range for this position presently, would we be inhibited from hiring that person if we had published a salary range that was below that person's expectations?
Not necessarily, but it does lead one to be a little uncomfortable. Were we transparent with, you know, what we could actually offer? Personnel decisions in the public environment are very tricky. Miriam, your hand is up. Did you have another comment? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. And Heather, you will get this. I took Robert Livingston's class on this, and the data that I just checked the recent data, but the literature suggests a salary range. And that, I think, is the current recommended standard in order to address equity. So I would vote for a range.
Okay. So what I'll probably do is work with Sharon and Bernie to come up with what we can afford and try to do some sort of range. And then it is my intent to post this, I think, by May 1st and have it open for at least 3 weeks to try to recruit very qualified candidates. And then the list of people that I would like working with me on the screening panel, a member of the school committee, 2 members from the advisory committee, Giselle Quigbo, who is stepping down from the Brookline Community Foundation, but she is a Brookline resident and she did all that work in the listening sessions of ARPA. And Jessie Gray, who is the chair of the Zero Emissions Advisory Board. And I'm trying to think who else was, for department head, Erin Galentine. And I think, and former select board chair, Ken Goldstein. So those are the people that I will have with me when we interview the candidates, and I will report back. Any other questions? My goal is to have a recommendation to the select board with plenty of time for a smooth transition, since we are losing Mel on September 1st. Yes-ish. Yeah. So I'm hoping that we make an announcement in the August timeframe so that everybody knows what's going on. John.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of data behind the question I asked. I do think a lot of people these days think of Brookline, more in the category of city than town, although we are still a town. And our population is now 64,000. And I think people think of Brookline as a community that has the complex problems and challenges of a small city. And just to cite examples from city managers versus town managers, I won't name the city, but there's a nearby city where the city manager makes $336,000. There's a not so nearby city, but one that's maybe comparable in terms of the challenges, where the city manager makes $283,000. So there's a category of manager that is from complex municipalities that is sort of over and above what we've been accustomed to aiming for. And, I think it's something we need to think about is, what level of mastery of complex management of a complex municipality are we aiming for? Because it like everything else in life, it comes at a price, if you want to aim for that sort of upper rank.
Thank you. It is definitely one of the most important decisions that we will make. So stay tuned. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we're running about a half hour behind. My apologies. Yes,
Heather,
Miriam.
I'm just going to make my exit if that's.
Yes, of course.
For those of you who don't know, I'm on vacation. So now my daughter and I are going to go out to dinner. So thank you all. And have a wonderful whatever rest of the meeting. I will listen to it later. And that's it. Bye.
Yes, thank you. And Sharon, thank you so much for assisting.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So Ailish Gilligan will be interviewing for the Small Business Development Committee. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for taking this time to speak with me regarding my application to join this committee. So just to introduce myself, my name is Ailish Gilligan, as you said. I am one of the owners of the Public House in Washington Square. We have been in business, believe it or not, in Brookline for 20 years this year. So I am obviously representing a woman in business and an immigrant. I have developed very deep roots in Brookline. I'm a long-term Brookline resident. I have 2 children enrolled in the Brookline public school system. I'm an active volunteer in the PTO at Runco. I sit on a grant committee there. I recently also hosted an 8th grade event at the public house for the graduating class of 2022, which was a great success. I am an active member of the Chamber of Commerce as well as the Mass Restaurant Association. I maintain close relationships with all my business neighbors in Washington Square as well as my residential neighbors. At this time of my career and life, my children are getting older and less needing of my time. So I would like to give back a little bit to the community, and that's why I've applied to join this committee. I feel I have valuable insight after running a business in Brookline for 20 years. I also believe greatly in collaborative efforts through committees where we can utilize each other's knowledge and expertise and help solve problems and come up with creative solutions. I think this particular committee is a great example of diverse individuals driven enough to offer their time, to work together, to deliver valuable information. So I would thoroughly enjoy joining this committee. I think it would allow me to deliver grassroots opinions and attitudes of my fellow business owners to the board. And I look forward to your questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Bernard.
So Washington Square is a lot different than Brookline Village and Coolidge Corner. What issues do you see as different in your areas than other areas of town that we need to focus on, or at least be aware of?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you at all. Your audio cut out there. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Well, I apologize. I didn't press the button here. So Washington Square and Coolidge Corner and Brookline Village are very different areas of town. Give me a sense of what you think we ought to know about the differences that would be something that the committee would focus on or should focus on.
I think Washington Square is very underrepresented in all committees on the town in general. I think the fact that we are mainly a service-based community and this pandemic has hit us particularly hard. People have been stretched past, operating in critical mass almost. We're all doing roles in our business that perhaps in the past we had kind of left behind. And I think it's hard for people to regroup when we're dealing with the stress of the pandemic. And so I will say the community in Washington Square has come together greatly to support each other. And I think that we need more representation. And I think moving forward, we will revitalize the business association in the square and help support each other, continue to help support each other.
Thank you.
Great. John?
Hello, Ailish, and thank you so much for applying for this important committee. Just wondering if you would comment on how things are going with the dining in the reserved spaces in the street or on the sidewalk, and also if you've got an idea as to how we can attract a business to the most important corner property there, the former the restaurant that's there, right on the corner there on Washington Street.
I believe you're hearing the application for the common vicular license for that space after me, I think.
Oh, well, wouldn't that be nice?
I believe
it's
you
next
are.
on our agenda.
Perhaps a license will help, huh?
Yeah, I do.
So-
I will say the parklets have been a lifeline for all of us. I believe when we looked back at our data, I can say safely 60% of my business was generated by the parklet space in the summer months. So undoubtedly it saved us. So I appreciate all the help from the town to make that happen for us. I'm not sure in the winter how much of a benefit that's going to be, but certainly this time of the year and yesterday for the marathon, it was absolutely fantastic. The feedback from the local community and from people who traveled from out of state. They all loved the structures. They were really excited to sit there and watch the marathon from them. So I really think they've benefited us greatly. As far as attracting new business to the square, I mean, I think we do have around a 10% store vacancy rate in Washington Square. I would really love to see more non-service based industry in the square, some vendors, some merchants. It would be great to see that. I really feel like there's a lot of room for developing the square. It's a lovely, vibrant community, and people walk around in the evening and people just stop and talk to each other. I think that there's a lot of room for development in Washington Square.
Great. Thank you so much for your interest. We will be making a decision at a future meeting.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
So next we have paid parental leave presentation by our HR director, Ann Braga.
Good evening, everyone. Ann Braga, HR Director for the town of Brookline. I have a few PowerPoint slides if Devin can allow me to share. Or are we going to run them through big?
You're all set.
Thank you. Share. The board has with them, hot off the presses from earlier today, a proposal for paid parental leave. I worked on this initially at the request of Select Board Member Raul Fernandez, but also had this on my planning agenda. It just got moved up ahead of time, so I appreciate sort of the nudge in that area. So we're going to start and talk about what is okay. What is currently available for employee leave? Currently, we have a variety of types of leave or pots of leave that we have available. The first is sick time, which is 15 days for each employee. It accrues over time, and that is 3 weeks worth of a 5-day work week. And I'll be talking about weeks in relation to a 5-day work week. And up to 7 days of that time can be used for sick family time. So not your own personal illness, but a serious illness of a family member. 8 days or personal time is up to 7 days, plus you can earn added days based on your use of sick time in the previous year. Vacation time between 2 and 5 weeks, depending on the amount of service you have and the collective bargaining agreement or non-union status that you're in. That totals 32 days or 6+ weeks of time to a maximum of 47 days, which is 9+ weeks of time out of a traditional 260 work days in a calendar year. Added to that is 2+ weeks of holiday time. So those are the leave banks that sort of come up in the regular day of an employee. Availability for FMLA is up to 12 weeks for a variety of reasons, including birth and care of a child, as well as other illnesses, other issues that are tied in under the FMLA law, and up to 8 weeks on mass parental leave law. And all of that leave, the FMLA and the MPLA, are both unpaid time. And so that we allow and require in many cases for employees to use accrued time and not go unpaid so that they're able to continue paying bills and things like that. I will say, and I've seen some public commentary over the last couple of weeks about why the town doesn't participate in paid parental leave. And I want to talk about that a little bit And it was passed in order to provide paid leave for a class of employees, traditional part-time non-benefited employees in the private sector who get no type of paid leave at all. And this was it's an employer-employee paid-in system similar to unemployment compensation. And municipalities give significantly more benefits to their employees, both unionized and not, than this would provide for. It also does not require the employee to pay a cost share, which the mass paid parental leave does require. Just a note on the times that I'm talking about, the weeks and days. Police and fire have different leave times due to shift differences, so that it's not absolute to our sworn public safety employees. So existing new child leave time. So this is FMLA and MPLA. Every employee has access to time off for the birth of a child. It's only paid if they have accrued leave available. And it's a specific type of accrued leave based on the definitions that are in our class and pay plan and our collective bargaining agreements. FMLA again as 12 weeks, MPLA is 8 weeks for birth and or care of a new child. And again, that is unpaid. The substitution of applicable accrued time, which is all paid at regular daily rates, is either sick for your own illness if you happen to be the birthing parent, or sick family for you to be out as the spouse or significant other of the birthing parent is available. Personal time, vacation, and some other employees have access to other leave times, including comp time. But that is not generally accessible to everyone. So the paid parental leave proposal that you have in front of you would cover non-union employees as of whatever the effective date is, and union employees, union represented employees, when they agree to the paid parental leave policy in their collective bargaining agreement. It is for benefit eligible employees, mostly full-time, but we do have some part-time employees who do receive and are eligible for benefits. Anything 20 hours or over is a benefit eligible position, unless it is a temporary or a contract position. The other requirements include 1 year of service with the town of Brookline and 1,250 hours worked in the last 12 consecutive months. That follows along with FMLA requirements. It covers, under the policy written in the proposal, birth, adoption, surrogacy, foster care, other legal placement where you end up, we have employees that could be now legally the responsibility of their grandchildren, as an example, and also stillbirths after 20 weeks. And the proposal would provide either 1 or 2 continuous leave periods within the 1 year of the new child coming into the home, whether through whatever means. The proposal is paid time, but is not from employee leave banks. And I think that's the difference, you know, in what FMLA is now, and that it is from your accrued time to fill in that unpaid bank. The proposal includes 2 weeks at 100% of base wages, 2 weeks at 75% of base wages, and the use of 25% of your wages would be done through your accrued time, either sick family if applicable, vacation, or A days. And then the third set of 2 weeks would be at 50% of paid parental leave and then 50% of accrued time. There'd be notice requirements and paperwork, obviously, with an expectation of 30 days advance notice from the expected leave. The proposal costs as defined include the 6 weeks. The town cost would be $212,000, $438, and the schools is just shy of $800,000 at $759,981, and the total being just under $1 million of $972,419. It's based on 2021 data, so the calculations there are based on 2021 data with 25 town employees documented for being out for birth of a child or family member birth of a child, and 60 school FMLA or MPLA leave times. The operational impacts which contribute to that cost are coverage for work, minimum staffing, overtime, working out of class. Police and fire in and of themselves represent 68% of the number of employees taking leave under the current FMLA provisions, followed by DPW and the coverage for that work, and school substitute coverage. These are the positions that cannot be left vacant for any amount of time. The few positions that we've had in the other departments are usually in an office position, and for the most part, folks in offices sort of roll up their sleeves and take care of the work that the missing employee is responsible for, so that there is a continuity of service. And that's all I have for my presentation. I will happily take questions and be happy to answer more in more detail. I think I came in under my 7 minutes.
Thank you. Any questions from select board members? Raul and then John?
Okay. Let me just do a little bit more framing here, and thank you, Anne, and your team for your work on this. I just think this is really important. This is something I can't even remember when I brought this up the first time, but it's been some time, and we've got a lot of things that we're trying to do all at once here. So I'm glad that we're getting to this. And I had a chance to talk with Anne about some of this proposal and get some clarity on some things here as well. The thing I want to talk a little bit about here is the standard that I think we should be working toward here, which is frankly even far below the standard in other countries around the rest of the world. And I'm looking at a map here, from 12 to 24 weeks, and even 24 weeks or more seem to be the standard elsewhere in the world. Here we are trying to work toward the possibility of eventually having 12, and we have a proposal here that provides for 6 weeks, but not even at 100% pay. Is we really need to think about like what this looks like in our country, one of the most developed, wealthiest countries in the world, that we have not found a way nationally to provide paid leave for birth or adoption, and in particular for birthing parents. I've got a 1-year-old at home now, and I could tell you, having been through this, 6 weeks ain't enough, like not even close to enough. And frankly, 12 weeks, I don't even think is enough, but is somewhere that I think we should be working our way toward. The thing I hope we can dig into is what the cost of something like this looks like, and talk a little bit more about that. But I think the way that I approach policy making is we figure out what the right thing is to do, and then we figure out how to pay for it. But we have to set our intentions. If we know that that there is no way that 6 weeks is enough for any parent, never mind the birthing parent, then we should be figuring out what 12 weeks looks like and actually working toward that. So I just want to sort of have us, hopefully as a board, set that intention to, even as we figure out how to move in this way without federal support, without enough state support, frankly, that we as a municipality say, this is important to us. This is a standard that we should be setting for other communities, and we're going to work together to figure out how we can actually pay for it. So I'm excited for this conversation. I've got lots more to say, but I want to hear from other board members.
Any other, John?
Thanks, Anne. And I'm not even sure that you are necessarily the person to answer this. If others want to sort of chime in, shouldn't this be bargained? I'm just used to benefits such as this, which are costly. I mean, we'll get.
So it would have to be bargained, and that's it. That was in the first slide of the proposal overview, that the only way it applies to unions is if they bargain it with the town.
And can I assume that part of the bargaining is that the benefit of this will be counted towards what we agree to as the cost of a contract for whatever the unit is that we're talking about?
I don't think Melissa, in her financial wisdom, would let us do otherwise. So yes.
So when we decide if this would be a good idea to do this, we have to sort of factor in, although it does come at a considerable cost, perhaps we are actually offsetting that cost a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit, by virtue of what the total contract cost is. Maybe the total contract cost would be greater if this weren't in it, and with this in it, it's less. Is that a fair description of how we will approach this?
It is possible. I think it depends on what is on the table for the various bargaining units.
Okay, doke. And ultimately, it's up to the select board to decide whether to provide this or not.
This is an initial policy, proposal. It's draft. It is, for you to look at, ask questions on, for me to come back on any questions you have. It will also be going to the HR board. And then it would, once it's adopted by the select board, ultimately, would then be, put on the table for bargaining with the various collective bargaining units.
But adoption by the select board is a key step.
Yes, similar to all other policies that are done as far as benefits. They would follow the same process.
Thank you.
Bernard?
Following up on John's comments, can we assume that it's not going, a proposal like this presented by the select board is not going to lower the cost of collective bargaining? I mean, why would unions want to give up something when they're just being handed a proposal like this?
Well, they wouldn't be handed the proposal. It would be an option on the table for them to look at as far as the bargaining process. So it doesn't apply to them until it's bargained.
Right.
So
But
only
there's
the
no
folks
reason
who
why
bargain
they
it
would
get
want
it.
to lower their wage demands, for example, because this is on the table.
I can't speak for the union's thought process.
Yeah, no, of course, we can't speak for anyone, but we can assume that it's not going to be less costly just because this is available.
So I'll weigh in. I'm not the biggest fan of this proposal. I really think that it needs to come from the federal government. That's just my personal feeling. However, there might be an opportunity. So for those that were in attendance for the earlier part of the meeting when we were playing Jeopardy, one of the points I wanted to hammer home, because even I forget about it sometimes, is that we are one of the only communities that pay or that subsidize up to 83% of our health subsidies. The federal government, I think, is in the 60s. Most other communities in the Commonwealth are paying somewhere in the 60s. And we haven't been successful at negotiating that back with the unions. So I would be open to having a conversation about this as a way to scale back into the 60s for the healthcare. But I'm not sure that this policy is something that should come from the local level first. Raul.
Yeah. And frankly, this would be something that obviously would be better if it came from the federal level and was fully funded. When that's going to happen, I couldn't tell you. What I can tell you is this, is that when we add up the amount of time that that employees get right now, let's say starting after they've been with us a sufficient amount of time, they get 15 sick days, 7 personal days, we call A days, and 14 vacation days. And depending how long you've been here, some of those the vacation days at least go up. That's a total of 36 days. If you wanted to take 6 weeks off right now, according to our current policy, you would need to use 30 of your 36 days and only have 6 days remaining for sick, for time with family, for anything else. If you wanted to use 12 weeks, you would need to use 36 of those days. And no, sorry, you would run out of days. You just simply couldn't. I think the most you can get is about 7 weeks off right now if you exhaust literally all the time you have at the start. Now, I don't know, maybe what Anne's about to say is that people can accrue time over time, and that there are employees that have accrued more time than that. But again, that assumes or presumes that they haven't used that time. We have a policy right now that in some ways encourages people not to use their time, right? So if you don't use any sick days in a year, well, then you get some number of personal A days as a bonus or benefit. I think people should be using their sick time. They should be using them for mental health days, if not because they've got a cough. Please stay home if you're not feeling well, by the way, right? They should be encouraged to use their sick time, not to not use it or to bank it for something like pregnancy. And so this is where, this is for me is one of those things we can say, hey, hopefully the feds come or the state comes and fixes this. And certainly there's an argument that they should, and I don't disagree with that. But here we are in charge of this community and hiring these employees. I don't think that we need to bargain against wages for something like this. I think also when we look at it by department, the number of births by department annually isn't so great. The numbers that I think the one difference would be the school department, where the most births, and correct me at any point if I'm wrong, but other departments like I think it was police with remind me, was it 9, fire with 8, and
Yes,
DPW with some smaller number?
Yes, I think the outlier here, and obviously in that, going back to Jeopardy, that town school partnership is the school department has its own set of challenges. It would obviously have to be bargained with BEU, and those folks, the slant from public safety is it's super predominantly men. The slant from schools is it's super predominantly women. It's almost diametrically opposed, right? And, only about 20% of our total FMLA time for birth of a child in 2021 was for the actual birthing parent. The others were all for the non-birthing parent.
Now let's if we just wanted to focus on the town side, last year we're talking about 25 people is what we're talking about here. 25. Now, might it be more? People say, wow, Brookline's got a really great leave policy. I'm going to work there instead of somewhere else. Maybe we'll get better people and maybe those numbers go up. But we're still talking about, I think, a manageable number of people that we could find a way to incorporate into the budget. The other thing is, as we think about things like, an override to paying for town services, incorporating that into this as well. I don't think it's, I've said this before, and I know it's a hard thing to say, is I just don't agree with bargaining against wages, because people need to make money to pay rent and feed their families and do things like that. And I think sometimes we lose sight that the purpose of life isn't work, but it's to live. And that there should be, there's a trade-off. You work, you put in so much time and you get some money and you're able to, find a way to live and, retire and I'll do all those kinds of things. I think where I hope that we're moving now is toward, and we see this happening in the private sector, is a move toward greater benefits, but not having people to wait until they retire to live a good life, that people should be able to live it right now and should be able to be paid fairly and have the right to time off, especially when they have a significant event like birth or adoption. And that's the standard that we should be moving toward. If we wait for the federal government to pass something that looks like that, maybe it'll happen, but who knows? We might be waiting another generation before something like that happens. I just think within our own budget that we can find a way to make this work.
So I don't want to spend too much time on this agenda item because we're not actually voting on anything here tonight. John, do you want to say something? And then we really do need to move along.
Yes, just I'll try to be brief. So we heard described at the beginning of this that there are places in the world that do better than we do, which I don't question at all. True. But in the proposal, I'll just read back. The Massachusetts paid leave law does not apply to municipalities specifically because municipalities grant greater paid leave than most private sector businesses covered by the Massachusetts paid leave law. So that's just one sentence from this proposal. And then so that people can, put some numbers on this, the least costly part of the table that we were offered as to what this might cost is 6 weeks at 75%, and that's a total of $972,419. The next least is 6 weeks at 100%, $1,003,000. Then 12 weeks at 75%, $1,009,000, and then 12 weeks at 100%, $2 million, basically $6. So this is money, and this is money that's going to have to come from somewhere. And I think we got to figure out in the context of our collective bargaining how we can afford this and also afford the collective bargaining agreements that are being sought right now by our various units.
Okay. I have more to say, but I'm probably not going to say. Let's move on because we have a whole bunch of licensing to dispense with, and we've been keeping everybody waiting. Raul?
Yeah, if I can just ask, where does, it'd be one thing if I was going to be on the board in 2 weeks and I could continue to push this forward. I guess the question is, where does the board go from here? Is this the end of the conversation? Is there a next step here? Or there be further analysis? Where does the board go from here?
Since this isn't a priority of mine, it doesn't seem like it's a priority of anyone else's. I'm not sure that it's really going to go anywhere unless it comes to us through the unions, through the collective bargaining.
And what about those employees that are not in the union?
Then they can wait for the federal government.
If the union negotiates this, I'm sure it would be also applicable to other employees.
We have a lot more control over what happens to non-union employees.
Yeah.
Mel, do you want to say anything about the non-union?
I would say two things. First of all, we've been talking about annual benefits, and it's important for you to understand that there is ability to accumulate or carry over benefits so that you have more than the annual allotment. In other words, you can carry over unused time. And there are significant employee leave banks that are out there. So I think you need to know that. I feel uncomfortable talking about this too publicly. I think if we're going to talk about strategy, we really got to talk about it in executive session. That's what I would recommend.
I'll just say I've been a public employee and I am now a private employee. To my surprise, the benefits on the private side, in my opinion, are better. However, I only get 6 paid holidays. When I worked for the state, I got 11, and I'm sure I would get Juneteenth now, so that's 12. But I was able to negotiate 4 weeks of vacation on the private side, as opposed to the state, which is very tied to time and service. This is a larger conversation, which is something that this is the reason I think it really needs to be sorted out at the federal level, because America is getting this one wrong. As a woman who does not have a family. I would love to have a family. I would have had a child if I felt like, one, I could afford it, and two, I could have taken enough time off of work to do it myself. So I completely empathize with it, but it's just not something that I'm prepared to have the town own first.
Okay, I'm disappointed, but I will I'll continue to advocate from outside of the board. I hope it's my I'll have time for final words next week, I suppose, but it's my sincere hope that the board will continue to think about ways that we could improve the condition for folks that are living in Brookline and under our employ. This is one where, frankly, even the proposal we have before us, which is a modest change in my view, is still significantly better than what we currently have. And I would encourage board members to take another closer look at it. What it essentially does is it gives 2 weeks fully paid to employees, and then gives the next 2 weeks at 75%, which they could top off by using the time they have available to them. And then the next 2 weeks at 50%, which they could top off by using the time available to them. I think it's very fair. And, again, modest in my view, but I think it's a very fair way to take a step forward. And I think I don't know. I think it's just in my view, like when faced with something that is just like unjust, we could, I don't know, we can hit the ball into somebody else's court. Or we could try to do something, anything to make it just a little bit more just. And I hope the board will take steps in that direction in the future.
Thank you. Lodging house agent, Susan Segur will be presenting. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. I did see her in the attendees list a moment ago, so maybe try to track her down. Food vendor license, Jamie Syracusa. For Jamie's Ice Cream.
I'm trying to get them to.
You can do it if I want.
Can you? Why aren't I there? Here, could you start the video? Start your video. Good evening.
Hi there. It seems like you may be signed in on multiple
yeah.
devices, so you're going to need to log out of that second device.
Okay, I'll log out. I'm going to go in yours then. Hi, I'm Jacob Walters. I'm here representing Jamie Syracusa, who's also with me. I'm going to just let you see that she's here as well. And I am here to speak to the board tonight about her request for a CV license. Shall I just proceed, or do you have any questions?
It's a food vendor license. Let me just see if there are any questions on the select board. This seems pretty
Heather,
straightforward.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can. They probably muted.
Are you hearing us?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
we do.
I'm sorry, we may have had our volume too low. Jacob Walters here representing Jamie Syracusa, who is here with me.
Hello.
Hello.
Shall I just proceed, or do you have any opening remarks, or do you want me to just move right into the licensing request?
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. So let me see if there are any specific questions from my select board members before I move the language.
Thank you.
John?
I just want to say I had the rare opportunity to speak to Jake about this yesterday when he served me a hamburger while I was watching the marathon. Thank you, Jake, for your work for the Rotary. And I feel very confident about this proposal. Can't wait to have my first scoop of ice cream.
Excellent. Any other questions? So the motion would be to approve the application for a food vendor license, Brothers and Sisters Co. LLC, doing business as Jamie's Ice Cream Co. at 5 Station Street in Brookline Village, Hours of operation will be Monday through Sunday, 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. Any objections before I call the roll? Okay, Bernard,
Aye.
Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you so much and best of luck.
Thank
Thank you both. Thank you all very much. Yep.
Are we circling back to lodging house agent? Excellent. Susan?
Hi, Susan. It looks like you're unmuted if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself.
Okay, we'll skip to number 13 because as I announced at the beginning of the meeting, number 12, change of manager for Barcelona is postponed until next week. So we're moving to common victular and entertainment license. Oh boy, that's Sitethep. And I apologize if I completely did not pronounce that correctly.
That's fine. Hi, can you see
Good
me?
evening.
Good evening. My name is Sitite Prajangsat, and this is my sister. We are owning the Roddy by City on Beacon Street.
Excellent. So you're here for a common vic and an entertainment license.
Yes.
Any questions from select board members on this license application? Seeing none. This is pretty straightforward as well. So I will move the two motions. I move approving the application of a common victular for Krajantsart
Yes.
Group. Okay. Incorporated, doing business as Oasits.
Yeah, Oasits Sweet.
Oasits, thank you.
Oh, yeah, Oasits
Sweet.
Sweet. Yeah.
At 1428 Beacon Street. Hours of operation will be Monday through Sunday, 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. Seating will consist of 18 inside seats. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And then the second vote is moving approval of the application of a new entertainment for Krajantsart Group Incorporated, doing business as Osits Suite at 1428 Beacon Street. Entertainment will consist of radio and television Monday through Sunday, 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you
best
very
of luck
much.
to you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Great. Any luck with Susan? Okay. Next up is a liquor, wine, malt package store and alternate manager public hearing. This is a public hearing. And do I see Bobby Allen?
You do, Madam Chair.
Great.
Madam Chair, members of the board, real quick, my name's Robert Allen. I have office 300 Washington Street in Brookline Village here with Josh Nakama, who owns Marucci, which is in Coolidge Corner, which is a Japanese market, food market in Delhi. And they just leased space right across the street where they're going to open up a Japanese, they want to sell wine, sake, and Japanese beers along with other complimentary bakery and food items. And, you know, it's great. And I think select board member Martinez will appreciate that. Fernandez will appreciate this, that here's an owner in Coolidge Corner who loves Coolidge Corner and wants to see another space available, jumps on it and wants to really flourish there in Coolidge Corner. So we're very happy to be here, happy to answer any questions. Josh is the type of kid that you're going to see there 60 hours a week. He loves his work. He loves what he does. And unfortunately, he's going to be putting the hours in. So we're happy to answer any questions that you
Great.
might have.
Any questions from select board members on the 2 applications?
Yeah, let me just ask you-
Bernard.
Yeah, I apologize for not, or being a little behind in my reading here, but this is an additional location for the company, right?
Yes,
In
it
other
is.
words, the existing store on the east side of Harvard will remain.
That's correct. A market and a deli on one side, and then it'll be more of the package store license across the street. It was a tea place, formerly a tea place.
Right.
Gensa, was that the name of it, Josh?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to gain a business. That's great.
You're gonna lose an empty storefront, which is great.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the liquor license laws and, all of the things that you must do to conform to Brookline's regulations?
I've reviewed them, yeah.
We went over the booklet with him. We kind of have a standard protocol here in the office. We went over the booklet. He understands everything he has to do. Set something up with the police department to make sure he understands the procedure. Having the little notebook, making sure he keeps track of everything. So he's Josh is a good student.
Great. That's exactly what we want to hear as well. Any other questions or comments before I move the language to be voted? Okay. I move approving. Oh, this is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
At this time, there are 23 attendees. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Thank you so much, Devin, for keeping me honest. I will close the public hearing and I will move the 2 motions. I move approving the application of a new wine and malt package store license for Fuji Mart Corp. Doing business as, oh boy, Marucci Select?
Marucci. Perfect.
Okay, Marucci. Select at 299 Harvard Street. Proposed manager of record is Josh. Is it Nakama?
That's right, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Question of approving the application of an alternate manager, Zhao Shao, Fuji Mart Corp. Doing business as Marucci Select at 299 Harvard Street. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
I believe we have Susan with us. Susan, can you go ahead and just let us know if you're here?
I am here.
Oh, great.
Sorry about that. I am definitely technically challenged. But anyways, my name is Susan Seeger, and I made an application to be the resident inn at the Samuel Sewell Lodging.
Great. I live right around the corner on Longwood. I'm very familiar
Okay.
with that property.
So they
Any-
no longer operate as an inn, a bed and breakfast. They're doing long-term rental lodging now.
Ah, okay. Good to know. Any questions from select board members? They did a wonderful renovation of that property a few years ago. Seeing none, I will move the language of question of I move approving the application for lodging house agent Susan Seeger for 143 St. Paul Street. All those in favor? Bernard,
Aye.
Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you so much, Susan, for your persistence.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too. Okay. Liquor license, all kinds, common vic, and entertainment license, public hearing. This is a public hearing. So please let Devin know if you want to make a public comment. I am guessing you're Scott? No?
For the record, my name is Bill Proya. I'm with the law firm of Reamer and Bronstein. Scott Lawton and Chris Messina are joining us remotely.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Really put the hybrid meeting to the test.
Yes, I wanted to come and introduce myself and say hi to everyone. So I
Great.
thought it would work out.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah,
I
no.
know you've been here for over an hour.
It was very enlightening. I'm a town meeting member in my town, so a lot of similar issues that we're dealing with. So I'm in Natick. Yeah. Yes, I'll just a little closer. Yeah.
A rundown of, what you're proposing and just assure us that you know how to handle the sale of alcohol.
Yes, I'll do it very quickly. Again, it's Bill Proya for the record, Scott Lawton, the manager, proposed manager, and the alternate manager, Chris Messina, joining us remotely. They both have considerable experience in the restaurant hospitality business with the company and previously with other companies as well. And they can give you some a little bit more detail on that if it's necessary. Do want to say we did receive all the departmental comments, very helpful, including the policies, police department procedures. So again, we went over them with Scott and Chris, so we're familiar with those as well. And again, they have experience in the business, so that should be comforting. They actually have a restaurant in Massachusetts right now. It's in the Seaport District, very close to, well, between Congress and whatever, Seaport Boulevard, now it's called. They also have restaurants in 11 states and the District of Columbia. So again, a very well-respected business, very experienced, and has familiarity with many states, including Massachusetts, and all the rules and regulations that apply. I was here earlier, so I heard the comment about Washington Square in this particular space. It is 1634 on the corner of Beacon and Washington Street. So we know it's a very important site. They're planning to invest a lot. They're very excited about the neighborhood. The vibrancy and diversity of the neighborhood matches their vision as well for their restaurants and how they operate them. So they're, the food's healthy, it's innovative, and it's a food first and food forward concept. So the floor plan, there's 116 seats, multiple modes of seating. So if you have a family event or you need to get in for a quick business meeting or lunch, again, there's a variety of single seats, 2 seats, some 4, and lots of booths. Again, 116 seats. There's sort of a bar side. If you've been in the restaurant or know the grade, it lends itself nicely to, again, that sort of quicker concept at the bar side, and then a more traditional dining room on the Washington Street and Beacon Street corner of the business. So there'll be some exterior renovation. We're going through the permitting and with the building department planning on that. It's going to be a nice fresh look. Lots of light gets in the building. So that, again, plays well with their concept of freshness and energy. So there's a menu if you want to take a look at that, or Scott can also talk about that a little bit more.
So I'm just looking at the address. This is the old Porto
Yes.
Maltese fireplace site. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent.
Exactly where it is. So that's really what I wanted to hit. Again, if there's questions later about more specifically about the floor plan or the regulations, I'll be happy to answer that. But I'd like to turn it over to Scott right now to give you his point of view and vision for the restaurant and the neighborhood.
Great. Thanks for having me. We're really excited about Brookline. I've been in this meeting before. The person who opened Barcelona. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood and the laws and regulations, but I'm also familiar with the people. And I always loved Brookline. So after opening in Seaport, it just seemed like a real natural for us. to get into the Brookline neighborhood. And I always loved the fireplace location, so I couldn't believe it was available. So we were really excited to be able to execute a lease there. A little bit about Bartaco. Bartaco is a 10-year-old concept. It's very unique. It's not your typical Mexican restaurant. It's more of sort of I would say it's more of a beach sort of vibe. It's got almost a nautical feel to it. The food is very healthy. It's small bites with really great cocktails and fresh juices, and the food is very healthy. We are a food-driven restaurant. The food is about 60% of our sales, and the bar is often used for lunches and quick bites for single diners. We draw a young to old crowd, families, very family friendly. We see a lot of families in our restaurant. The kids menu is very popular also. But we're kind of a busy all day restaurant. It's a walk in, walk out, really comfortable. And it's just, I think the design fits really well with the building there. And I think it's going to fit really well in the neighborhood. So we're super excited about getting there and getting open.
Great. We're equally as excited to have you open. Any questions before I move the multiple motions to be voted on? And Devin, you'll let me know if there are any public comments to be made. Raul.
Just I know we're at this point in the night, we're trying to move through our agenda quickly, and I won't hold that up too much, but I want you all to know, and the business owners that have been here before, it doesn't mean we're not very excited about you being here and the changes that are happening in Brookline. They are for the better. Activating that space is critical for the Washington Square area. I've been to a Bartaco before in Connecticut, and it's a great place, and it's going to be really good for Brookline, and just really cements Washington Square as a foodie destination. And after that one is successful, please open one in Coolidge Corner as well. Thank you.
Any other comments before I move the language? Did you want to make a comment?
No, I just didn't want to leave the public comments out if there are any, just to be safe.
Devin, are there any people that have indicated they would like to speak?
At this time, there are 19 attendees and no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Great. At this time, I will close the public hearing and I will move to the language to be voted. The first vote is I move approval of the application of an all alcohol beverages license for Bartaco, Brookline LLC, doing business as Bartaco, at 1634, 1636 Beacon Street. Proposed manager of record is Scott R. Lawton. Proposed operating hours of operation will be Monday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. Proposed alcohol beverage service hours will be Monday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I move approval of the application of a common victular license for Bartaco Brookline LLC, doing business as Bartaco at 1634, 1636 Beacon Street. Operating hours will be Monday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. Seating will consist of 116 seats. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I move approval of the application of an alternate manager, Christopher Messina, for Bartaco Brookline LLC, doing business as Bartaco at 1634, 1636 Beacon Street. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Finally, I move approval of the application of an entertainment for license for Bartaco Brookline LLC, doing business as Bartaco at 1634, 1636 Beacon Street. Entertainment consists of recorded music that will be played Monday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please let us
Appreciate it.
know when you open.
We will. Don't worry.
Great. Okay, now we are into the annual town meeting warrant articles, public hearing. And I think we only have one warrant article to be presented. We will be voting on several that we have been presented at prior meetings in a few minutes. But the one warrant article that we have for the presentation here tonight is on the budget. And Melissa Goff is here to walk us through.
Good evening, everyone. I have a very brief PowerPoint that will just catch you up to speed on what we've done so far, where we're at, and then next steps. So I'm just
Usually
going to...
I don't believe people when they say very brief, but Melissa, you've never let me down.
So we have been reviewing the financial plan since the budget came out in mid-February. You've reviewed all of the departmental budgets. We have about $348 million worth of expenditures. What's changed since the budget has come out? A few things. So our GIC rates did come out. They came out a little bit higher than what we had planned for. So we are looking at that, but we think that we can live with what we currently have in the budget and then make adjustments in the fall if we need to. Debt service, we'll be making some adjustments around specifically the Driscoll geothermal project because that's tied directly to the property tax number. When we have a difference in the budget versus the actual, we've already gone out for the bond sale. We need to make sure that's trued up with our revenue number and property tax. So we'll have adjusted numbers for you next week. In terms of state aid, the House Ways and Means budget did come out this past week. So we've got some updates around that as well. Tonight, you've voted some decisions on the ARPA funding, and so that provides certainty for certain departmental and then school department budgets as well. And then the building department, we are looking at potentially redirecting, that shouldn't say million, that should say 340,000 additional from the CIP to help support some of the repair and maintenance needs in the building department. So the advisory committee is going to be scheduled for a vote next week. I'm not asking the board to vote tonight. You'll also be presented with a prepared vote next week as well. So in terms of Ways and Means, one of the other adjustments that we'll be making is looking at the assuming the Ways and Means budget that came out. Now, typically we would wait until the fall, but considering the recommendation around Chapter 70 and the need on the schools, we're pretty confident that what came out for Ways and Means will stay. So that provides an additional $214,000. And that's basically $60 per pupil that the House provided as opposed to $30, which was the original proposal from the governor. This is the list of items that we've been talking about with the advisory committee. So a lot to digest here. Some of these things were addressed through ARPA. Some of these things are still up for discussion. I think the planning position is something that's still a hot topic of discussion. And given all the work on leaf blowers and enforcement, I think that conversation is very much in play. These are, some of the items that advisory committee would like to see in the budget. Now, obviously, we don't have the capacity to handle all of these things. So we're going to need to, sharpen our pencils and figure out, where the priorities are and what we can do with, additional funding that we've been able to identify. So that is essentially an update on where we are at. Next week, I'll have a prepared vote, but if you want to take this time to open the public hearing and hear from the public on any other additional comments on the financial plan, now's the time.
And that is how you present numbers.
Great.
Are there any people from the public that would like to make a public comment? I will open the public hearing.
Hey, Deborah, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. I'll use 10 seconds to thank the select board for making their way through the ARPA discussion earlier this evening. I know it was a Herculean task, and I want to, thank the staff that worked on it as well. A lot of folks tend to be unseen, unheard, but it's their contributions that get us quality products. So I just wanted to say thank you. My budget question, and I know it's a little late in the game, but what would be the opportunity to seek to increase the recreation department's budget for the benefit of children who do not have access to the town's current parks and recreation system?
I'm going to call on the town administrator.
Well, I just do want to remind Deborah and the board that as part of the package that was adopted in the ARP, an additional $500,000 was allocated to the Brookline Community Foundation Safety Net Fund for that very purpose. So it's not in the budget; it was put in the ARP budget. I don't know if that answers your question or.
Well, it does partially, and believe me, I'm very appreciative. But there's also the piece of, let's say we get an increase in students of 15-20%. Well, that's going to require at least some additional part-time kids over the summer, and potentially another professional person. So I'm I'm concerned about the kids having access, but I'm also concerned about there being enough infrastructure to make the experience worthwhile without, and Mel, Melissa, you know better than anybody. You work your people to the bone. You're working your people to the bone. And maybe this is for select board, but as we ask for departments to do more, I think we have to be much more willing to provide the resources for them to do it. So, and I know that's not a popular thing to say, but I don't think it's fair to the workforce on the one hand, and I also see a critical service that we need to provide.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. That we need to provide a very, very vulnerable group in our community. So those are my comments. Thank you.
At this time, there are 15 attendees and no one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Any comments from select board members? Raul.
Yeah, only to say that I appreciate the expansion of the safety net fund to cover this use. I think it's good, and I think it's a helpful Band-Aid. We have also discussed sort of this more holistic solution that I know Mel's going to work with the board on. It's the one thing that I've at least so far committed myself to working on. If you'll have me to help move that forward, but I think the way Mel's thinking about this right now is right in that we need to have a more holistic, elegant solution so that people don't have to call the safety net every time they have this need. It puts more pressure on the staff there, in fact. But by virtue of, let's say, having free or reduced lunch in the schools or some other categorization, automatically have these costs waived. So we need to figure out how to make that work. The only thing I'd press on is I know this is a priority for our town administrator, and I want to make sure that we get the process moving while we still have this town administrator, so that at least the process is underway, if not completed before we have someone else in the role.
Okay, and I will also commit to shepherding this if it does spill over into our next town administrator. Any other comments? John?
Thank you, Melissa, as always. And I did have to leave the room and I came back. If I missed anything, I apologize. Getting back to what we discussed earlier in the evening, the ARPA program and the various things that will be funded, that's, a considerable amount of money, $20+ million. How will we continue to keep people posted on what is being appropriated and to whom and how it is being spent under the ARPA program?
So we'll continue to utilize the ARPA site to make sure that people are updated on where we are with the process. We're still required to do quarterly reporting through the Treasury site. Those reports have been and will continue to be posted on the ARPA site as well. And we're going to be meeting in a few weeks. We'll have updates. That site is really where everyone should be driven to understand where we are in the process.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Remember that Melissa said we are not going to be voting on this here tonight. We will probably vote on this next week, although I unfortunately won't be with you. So
There is a question in the Q&A. Can
Oh.
the town use ARPA funds for the Recreation Department administrative costs? I know that there is a limit on how much of ARPA can be used.
So I can answer that. As long as it's within the provision of government services, it's an eligible cost through ARPA.
great. And as Mel said, it is addressed through what we just voted on here tonight. Correct?
To be clear, we are not funding administrative cost or personnel through this. At this point, it's contemplated that there would be an agreement with BCF or some similar opportunity to, as Dr. Fernandez said, sort of more elegantly adopt this program, implement this program.
Kind of like the financial policy, financial aid policy that the schools have. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to, and any other members of the public that wish to speak?
At this time, there are 15 attendees and no one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
At this time, I will close the public hearing for warrant Article 8, which is known as the budget. And we will move on to the warrant articles that have been presented before us. I think most of these are not controversial, except maybe, well, I don't know whether or not the comprehensive plan funding is controversial. So we're going to be voting on warrant articles 4, special appropriation closeout, warrant article 10, comprehensive planning funding, warrant article 14, special permit conditions, warrant article 15, Boylston Street East, warrant article 16, required non-residential area and general business, warrant article 17, electric vehicle charging, and warrant article 18, bike parking. My understanding, aside from the comprehensive planning warrant article, is that all of these are sponsored from our own Department of Planning and Economic Development.
I can take
Could I just
Article
add-
4.
Except for 4. Oh, right. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, well, maybe let's take 4 first. Melissa, will you just kind of jog my memory on
Sure.
what that is?
Article 4 is an annual article that we file, essentially compelling departments to describe where they are with certain CIP accounts. At this time, we've collected the information from departments, and there are no accounts that need action from the select board. There are a couple of accounts that are potentially looking to be redirected. So under Article 10, there are the zoning bylaw reorganization funds. We talked about that last week, potentially being redirected under Article 10. And then there may be another account or two that we would redirect through the budget to help support some building maintenance. But at this point for Article 4, there's no recommendation for action. Essentially, the purpose of Article 4 is to compel the information to be provided. And then, town meeting can decide whether or not they want to take any additional action. So the recommendation under Article 4 is for no action.
Okay. Thank you for that summary. Any discussion before I move no action? John?
Forgive me, I got ahead of myself. No, not on this question, no.
Okay, let's dispense with this first and then maybe warrant Article 10 and then go on down the line. So I'm moving no action on warrant Article 4, which is special appropriation closeout. All those in favor of no action, say aye. Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay. John, is your question on warrant Article 10 or one of the other warrant articles?
I just wanted to insert a comment, which is, although I would like to think Article 15 will not be controversial and will fly through town meeting, I think people who are listening who have some questions that they want to ask about it probably would say it might be a little controversial. So I just wanted to be sure we understood that.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about warrant Article 10 first, which I thought was controversial, but I do remember that Kara Bruton, our Director of Planning, said that she didn't have any problems with it. So that made me feel a little bit better. Any other discussion?
Yeah.
Bernard?
It's pretty straightforward, reprogramming of money to do what the town meeting asked us to do. So, I mean, there's nothing controversial about it at all.
Well, I think the thing that I didn't like is that it really takes the discretion of how money is allocated away from the Director of Planning. But as you pointed out, there have been warrant articles that need funding, and this is kind of the bookend to that. Any other comments? Raul?
I mean, I'll just say, I think the, I don't think we had this conversation during town meeting. There were advocates on both sides. They reached this compromise. Had the advocates continued to say, this is a red herring and we need to continue about our business and not go down this essentially it's a Brookline by design road, then I would have supported that. But in the absence of advocacy in the opposite direction, let's just go ahead and move forward with this. But I will reiterate what I said last time, which is this changes nothing as it relates to warrant articles, including those that would change zoning, coming to town meeting, being discussed, being voted on. That was the compromise. That was the agreement that even as this, whatever this process ends up looking like, and however long it plays out, however much it costs, that we continue about the business of through town meeting, addressing bylaw amendments, zoning bylaw amendments as they come. And so I see no reason to stand in the way of this. I just wanted to say, I was as looking at all these and just thinking, just a reminder, I always felt like a little weird about this with board members right before they're not on the board anymore, voting on warrant articles, only because what does town meeting care about that? Whether or not a former select board member thinks about any of this stuff, right? I mean, it's really, so what I'll vote so that we have a vote, but keeping in mind that Mike Sandman is going to be the person in this seat or whatever seat once after May 3rd, assuming he votes for himself, after May 3rd, and that if he wants, he can ask the board to reopen something and change it so that, and I think this is right and proper, that the vote that comes before town meeting more accurately reflects the board as it's constituted at that point. So I'll weigh in, but in a way, I'm kind of like, well, it shouldn't matter too much what I say right now, because it really should matter what the board that meets on May 10th, what they have to say about any of this. So there you go.
Of course, town meeting is going to accept or reject
right
what the select board says anyway.
Which does often happen. Yeah.
Well, so I once upon a time wanted to wait until the night, basically the week before the combined reports were due, for us to just do okay, this entire meeting is just about the warrant articles. But what I was reminded is that Melissa writes all of our reports, and that was really mean to do to her. So we, this is not a perfect process by any means. But yes, she'll be able to at least get started on that report, and then probably the discussion doesn't change substantially when there is a change in the select board. Any further comments before I move favorable action? Melissa?
I just have one edit for you. When we were reviewing with
Then add in edeb.pdf, and these are wordsmithing edits that make a lot of sense.
Excellent. And they have your full support?
Yes, thank you.
Any questions from select board members? So I will move, can I call it the advisory version?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, I will move the advisory committee's version of warrant article 16. All those in favor of favorable action, Bernard?
Based on Kara Gruten's comfort level with the revisions, I'll vote aye.
Raul?
Agreed. Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you so much for sticking with us at this hour. And then last two warrant articles, 17 electric vehicle charging and warrant article 18 bike parking. I vaguely remember this. I know it was very late in our meeting last week. Any discussion about this? Again, I believe this is warrant articles that are sponsored from our own staff and departments. Kara or
yes, Ms.
Maria?
Maria, yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that the version you have before you is the version that was approved by the Advisory Land Use Subcommittee. And this was also supported by individual petitioners, Scott Englander and Jesse Gray. If you recall, last town meeting, they had proposed a warrant article with a similar premise.
Oh, great. So we finally reached some consensus.
Yes.
Is Dan Bennett on board?
I'm not sure if he's in attendance. He was at Land Use Subcommittee at Advisory.
Okay. Excellent. Any questions or comments before we vote on this? Sometimes it's all about timing.
It's 9:05.
So I'm moving the advisory committee's subcommittee version of warrant article 17. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And then Maria, if you want to just say a few words about where the bike parking warrant article stands.
Right, and this was also approved unanimously. The version that you have before you in your packet, very minor edits, and that version was approved by the Advisory Land Use Subcommittee. And we also had a great deal of consensus in the bike community. There were two Brookline residents who had approached us with this idea and were very supportive of where the warrant article landed.
Great, thank you. Any discussion from select board members before I move the advisory committee's subcommittee version? Okay, I will move that version of warrant article 18. All those in favor of favorable action? Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Devin, is that all of our agenda? I know. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for tuning in.